The knight holds the dead woman by the hair and declares that the witch Owen is dead, and now it is all over for Clan Leth. The girl looks at her dead mother in horror and begins to scream in despair. As soon as the girl moved, dozens of swords were immediately pointed at her. The knights discuss that Owen's daughter is in front of them and decide what to do with her next. One of the guards says that the girl needs to be sent to the crown prince as a trophy. The girl looks at the knights with anger and thinks that her mother is now dead and her clan has been destroyed. Nomads of the Leth clan, a small people who emerged from the Lita plateau. From the very beginning, they had dark hair and skin. They were said to be on the other side of the world. Stupid people who sought to show their superiority by ostracizing themselves and others were branded. During the invasion of the Blanche Kingdom, many members of the clan were killed, so they had to leave their lands. 300 years have passed since then, and a lot has changed. The surviving clan changed its name from Alita to Lita. The skin and hair, which were completely black, changed color over time. Nomads wandered throughout the country, staging performances and thereby earning a living. The memory of their persecution gradually faded, and Leth might have become a culture if only the civil war in Blanche had not required a new enemy of the people. First, Prince Waldo Blanche looks at the girl with interest and asks her name. The young woman lies on the floor, trembling all over, and answers that her name is Martina. The prince grabs the girl by the chin and scornfully says that she has a suitable name for a mudblood. Waldo smiles nastily and says that Martina will be good entertainment for the coming night. The heir made a plan for a win-win situation by eliminating all half-brothers competing for the position of successor. Waldo intended to destroy both sides, attracting Lita, who had only annoyed him for a long time. The man throws Martina on the bed and says that there is no point in giving up your name. People are afraid and reject what is different from themselves. The prince leans his whole body on the girl, who with tears in her eyes understands that she can do nothing. The king announces that the first prince has successfully suppressed the escape of the second heir, who rebelled and was in cahoots with a clan of witches. In gratitude for this, the ruler transfers the throne to the original successor. The second prince, Theodore Blanche, who is in prison, sadly realizes that his death is not far off. Waldo gave the order to capture his brother, declaring that the nomads of Leth had admitted to conspiring with him. Theodore tried to justify himself and shouted that he had been unfairly slandered. Sitting in prison, the prince reflects that he never wanted to become king, and although Waldo is a half-brother, he considered him his own. Suddenly, a man appears from the other side of the bars, completely hidden by a cloak. Martina takes off her hood and says that even though Blanche's hated blood flows in the young man, she will save his life. The girl offers to help the prince, but in return he must lend her his strength. Theodore sadly notes that now he is completely oppressed. He has neither power nor freedom left. Martina looks at the prince and in a quiet but decisive tone declares that she will kill the king. The girl screams that Theodore must avenge his shame by using her as an instrument of revenge. It was this meeting that was the beginning of a relationship that would stretch through 100 years. A few days later, Waldo organized a large festive banquet in honor of his accession to the throne. Martina was thrown in the center of the hall, to the amusement of everyone present. Suddenly, Waldo throws a sword at the girl and orders her to perform the famous sword dance that her clan is so proud of. Martine realizes with hatred that in front of her is the sword of the murdered Owen. Blanche wants to put on a performance from the symbol of the destroyed clan. The king thinks with a grin that even a wild beast that cannot be tamed, before death, tucks its tail between its legs, becoming submissive. Martina grabs the sword and begins her frantic dance, which attracts the attention of everyone gathered. Suddenly, with one powerful blow, the girl kills the king's guards. Waldo jumps up from the throne in fear. The king, enraged, orders the rest of the knights to kill the insignificant witch. Suddenly, the crowd parted, and Prince Theodore walked towards the throne, surrounded by guards. The brother looks at the king smugly and asks if he likes the celebration. The knight asks Theodore if it is worth sending the soldiers. The prince looks thoughtfully in the direction of Martina. With amazing dexterity, strength, and grace, the girl deals with all the soldiers attacking her. Martina said that dancing with a sword is not just an entertainment performance. This blade is forged in order to kill people. Theodore was sure that no matter how well the girl wielded the sword, Most likely, she would not be able to leave there alive. The second prince orders the doors to be closed and to ensure that no one can leave the hall. Even though Waldo must die, it is impossible to bring shame on the royal family, so he wants to present everything as the last atrocity of the witch. 2 hours later, the knights are surprised to notice that not a single sound is heard outside the doors. Despite the guards' concerns, Theodore orders the doors to be opened. Suddenly, the door swings open with a strong kick, and Martina appears on the threshold. The prince and the guards look in amazement at the girl from whom blood is flowing. No one understands how Martina managed to deal with everyone and survive, because there were about 200 people in the hall. A girl with a sword in her hands approaches the trembling Waldo, who begs to spare him. With a grin, Martina says that after everything that happened, it is shameless for the king to beg for mercy. The brother turns to Theodore in despair and begs him to save him from the maddened witch. Hearing Waldo's words, the girl abruptly turns away and heads towards the second prince. Martina bows before Theodore and asks permission from her king to cut off the prince's head. After only 1 moment, Theodore, without any regrets, allows Martine to fulfill her desire. This is how Waldo's reign ended, and Theodore became the new king of the Blanche Empire. The new king won the hearts of the people by showing him asking God for forgiveness for his brother's sins. On the day of the coronation, Theodore gave the girl the title of Marquise, and from that day she began to be called Marquise Martina Owen de Lita. Martina, the last remaining heir of the Leta clan, became known as the guardian of the royal family. Martina began to be called the Scarlet Sword, and her fame spread throughout the continent. The girl's reputation cast a shadow on the king, and since then, Blanche's empire began to be called the Scarlet Country. 8 years later, Leta was again accused of treason due to the king's selfish motives. Martina could not believe that Theodore Blanche could betray her and the clan. The girl's servant reports that despite the king's bad influence, many people support the girl. The young man assures that Martina must take advantage of this opportunity and break Blanche's state. So the girl turned the edge of her sword against the palace, supported by a large army. Martina enters the throne room and angrily tells the king that he took away the hope that he himself gave her. The marquise asks why the king betrayed her so mercilessly. Theodore looks sadly at the girl and declares that he has nothing to say to her. Martina cries in pain, and the king asks her forgiveness for using her to the very end. Theodore calmly stands up and says that the girl can do what she must. King Theodore met the same end as his brother, and Martina was crowned king. Much later, many researchers were sure that the king loved Martina, but all this remained only a theory. Attempts to destroy and exploit the Leta clan ended in the complete destruction of the royal bloodline. Subsequently, Martina crushed the entire continent and thus formed the Carabella Empire. Once the continent was reunited, the empress moved south, leaving the throne to her loyal servant Alito. Until her death, Martina had no children, so the bloodline of the Leta clan disappeared. The teacher ends by saying that since then, no emperor has the right to bear the surname Carabella. The woman slams the book shut and says that only Empress Martina was allowed to bear this name. The teacher looks at the class. The boys and girls are deeply impressed by the story they heard. The young girl looks absent-mindedly out the window. It seems that her thoughts are now much further than Empress Martina. The teacher adjusts his glasses on his nose and calls out to the student with obvious displeasure. Only the third time she hears her name, the girl turns and looks at the teacher in surprise. The professor sarcastically remarks that, obviously, history class is too easy for Astina. The woman is sure that the girl was looking out the window because she already knows the contents of the lesson. The Palade Academy is home to the brightest talents that form the intellectual foundation of the Carabella Empire. Every year, students take difficult exams. If a student fails twice, he is immediately expelled. The professor does not understand how Astina can successfully pass these tests and get high enough scores. The teacher decides that this time she will not put the brakes on the girl's frivolity. The woman says that Martina helped Theodore eliminate all his political rivals and asks how many noble houses were destroyed during this time. The students look at each other in fear. Such information is not even in the textbook. Everyone looks at Astina, who pays no attention to anyone and thoughtfully curls her fingers. The girl says that if you don't count all the nobles who lost their possessions, then a total of 12 houses were destroyed. Realizing that Astina managed to get out, the professor asks the next question. Princess Selin, Theodore's aunt, married the Duke of Atalant. Why then did she support Theodore, who was not the crown prince? Astina confidently says that the concubine Ansel, Theodore's mother, was the eldest daughter of Count Sherritt, and at one time served as Selin's maid, with whom they were close. The teacher menacingly says that she did not know how well the student understands the history of the empire. Looking at the girl, the professor says that she would like to hear her opinion on current research in this area. Astina says there are many scholars who have their own interpretations of Martina and Theodore's last conversation. Many believe that the future empress planned everything from the very beginning to deliberately cloud the king's mind and take the throne. The teacher is not far behind and asks what Miss Astina's personal opinion is on this matter. The professor happily thinks that the girl will not dare to challenge the authoritative historian and awaits the answer with interest. The girl looks at the table and thinks that she has once again complicated her life and should be more careful in the future. Astina stands up and says that for Martina, Theodore's betrayal was the most severe blow in her life. The girl blushes and says that in her opinion, Martina loved the king from the very beginning. The professor takes off his glasses and asks threateningly if the student wants to make fun of her with her answer. But then the bell rings, and literally a second later, there is not a single student left in the class. Canna smiles and says that Sis did it again and went against the teacher. The girls walk down the corridor, and Astina says that she was just looking out the window during class. Canna looks at her sister and realizes that she is one of a kind. The younger sister is a genius. She learned to speak much earlier and faster than others. While ordinary children were learning to walk, Astina was reading piles of books on the history of the empire. Parents began teaching Astina manners and etiquette at the same time as their eldest daughter. To everyone's amazement, the youngest of the sisters mastered these lessons in 3 days. Looking at her sister's progress, Canna locked herself in her room and declared that she would no longer study with her sister. Later in the evening, the mother explains to the girl that she is very smart and smart for her age, and her parents are proud of her. The mother hugs Canna and says that her daughters are the best, but Astina is an exception to the rule, and you just need to accept it. At night, Canna wakes up from her younger sister sneaking into her room. With a stern expression, Astina declares that her sister does not need to be critical of herself, otherwise it will haunt and chain her until her death. Several years later, Canna witnesses her younger sister telling off the new escort knight, Sir Hisang. The man, in despair, admits that he was mistaken and asks the girl for forgiveness. Astina coldly remarks that if the knight remains like this, he will not be able to protect her father, and he will be killed. Noticing her older sister in the bushes, the girl leans over to her and asks her to keep everything she hears secret. Astina says that the father will be disappointed with the incompetence of his subordinate. Canna is sure that her father will be more disappointed that her sister is engaged in fencing, but Astina confidently says that being weak is much more dangerous. The younger sister promises that she will give Canna her dessert for a whole month if she agrees to keep everything a secret. The elder sister reflects that from early childhood, Astina spoke like a 60-year-old man in the body of a 5-year-old child. The girl tells her sister that, be that as it may, she should not contradict the professor if she wants to complete her studies until the end of graduation. Suddenly, Astina thoughtfully pronounces the name of the founder of their empire, Martina Owen de Leta Carabella. The girl thoughtfully says that the family prefix Day was used by the Marquises in the Kingdom of Blanche, and Martina later became queen. Canna ponders that the Empress really has not erased from her name the past title given to her by the traitor. The girl simply remembered the name of the Empress, written down in textbooks, but never even thought about its origin. Suddenly, the sister says that Astina did not want to give up the name given to her by Theodore. Canna looks at her sister in surprise, and she, realizing that she had mixed up the name, hastily admits that she misspoke. The girls walk down the corridor, and Canna notices that her sister understands Martina's feelings very well. Astina admits that she knows the former empress almost more than herself. Suddenly, their friend Rachel runs up to the girls, holding some papers in her hands and choking on tears. The student says that she accidentally read a letter addressed to Canna. Astina snatches the papers from her hands and begins to read with concentration. Rachel mutters that she is ashamed of the misunderstanding, but the contents of the letter are simply terrible. Canna asks in bewilderment what is in the letter, but her sister continues to read intently. Unable to withstand the tension, the older sister loudly demands that the girls immediately tell her what happened. Astina looks at her sister with a gloomy expression and remains silent. Rachel begins to tell. The letter says that Canna should marry the Duke of Atalent. The girl realizes with horror that we are talking about the notorious monster Duke Theriot. The mother reports that in breaking news, the girl's father's business has gone through a huge crisis. The man invested all his money in exports, but the ship carrying the goods was caught in a storm and sank. Due to huge debts, the mansion in which they live is about to be taken away. But the Duchy of Atalanta, with whom the family did business, promised to cover all their debts. The deal will take place on the condition that Canna marries the Duke of Atalent. At the end, the mother writes that they had no choice, and the fate of the whole family now depends on the girl. The wedding is scheduled in a week, so Canna should return home as soon as possible to discuss all the details. Canna announces that she needs to go home, turns around, and quickly leaves the room. The Duchy of Atalanta, a family of worthy vassals, dating back to the founding of the Kingdom of Blanche. The family maintained their position as loyal vassals, even after the founding of the Carabella Empire. By all rights, such a trivial family as Rite could never contact one of the most ancient and noble families of the empire, but the dukes have one serious problem. The current head of the family was a monster with a body covered in fur, and no one knew exactly why and when Theriot van Atalanta became like this. Canna slams the closet door hard and realizes that she has no way out. A girl must marry and have a child from someone who tears people apart. Canna got the impression that she was simply told to go and die. Hearing Astina's steps, her sister says that the girl should know why she sometimes teased her. Canna says that even though her sister is a little weird, she still loves her very much. Suddenly, the girl throws herself on her sister's neck and begins to sob bitterly. Astina says that under no circumstances should she leave. Canna emphatically states that they are descendants of Count Reedy, and now it is her time to fulfill her duty, and this is how a noble lady's marriage should be. Astina is furious and says that not all noble ladies marry in preparation for death. Canna breaks down and screams that she has no choice because she can't run away and live her life alone. The girl cries and says that if she does not agree to this marriage, the whole family will collapse. Astina gently says that they cannot afford to sell their sister's life because of their father's mistakes. Canna thinks that even a genius cannot understand the foundations of this world, and asks if her sister knows what happens to the fallen aristocrats. The sister calmly says that men become convict laborers, and women either become someone's mistress or a prostitute. Astina stubbornly asks whether the suffering of other people is more important than the life of Canna herself. Canna responds emphatically that no one can live without honor, so the matter is not discussed. Astina extends her hand to her sister and says that it is already late and the girls should return to this conversation tomorrow. In the evening, the students discuss the latest news and notice that Canna even skipped dinner and will sleep with Miss Astina today. The sisters lie in bed and remember that they haven't slept in the same bed for 10 years. As a child, when Canna had nightmares, Astina would come and calm her sister down. Obviously, this would be the last time. The girl looks at her quietly crying sister and thinks that she cannot let her leave. Astina looks gloomily with unseeing eyes and decides that she must do everything possible, but not allow this marriage. Suddenly, the younger sister thanks the older sister for keeping the secret and not telling anyone about Sir Hyson. Astina says that she was caught when she wanted to steal the sword from the knight. The girl remembers how the Sir gave her a wooden sword and promised to give her his, a family heirloom, if she managed to hit him at least once. With a laugh, Canna learns that her sister beat the knight. He lost his family heirloom and became a drunkard. Astina admits that she returned the sword before entering the academy. Canna says that she was simply happy to learn that her sister would study with her at the same department of politics. Astina covers her sister with a blanket and says that she needs to sleep because she will have to get up early tomorrow. A little later, the girl listens to her sister's breathing and makes sure that she is fast asleep. Astina gets up, collects her things quietly, trying not to make noise, and leaves the room. The girl understands that she is walking through the corridors of the academy for the last time. Most likely, she will never be able to graduate. Images of kings appear in Astina's head, and she realizes with despair that this time she will not have a normal life. When the girl was 3 years old, she became fully aware of herself and was surprised to realize that she had been reborn. The girl cannot understand why she remembers her past life, because more than 100 years have passed since her death in Martina's body. The realization of all this was disappointing and depressing, because everyone Martina knew was already dead. The image of Theodore appears before the girl's eyes, and she thinks with hope that maybe he too has been reborn. At some point, Astina decides that she is no longer Martina at all and needs to accept this fact. Having decided to accept herself in a new image, the girl wanted to live her life honestly and serve her family faithfully. Astina enters the stable and reflects that the event that happened has made adjustments to her fate. Heading to the gates of the academy, the girl realizes that Canna, who led a measured life, will not be able to survive as the wife of a duke. Suddenly, Astina sees a silhouette at the gate, but he is too small for security. Canna blocks her sister's driveway and angrily demands that she stop. The sister asks in surprise where Astina was going without warning her. The girl quite calmly replies that she is heading to the Duchy of Atalanta. Canna shouts in anger that her sister is too confident. This time her opponent is not a man, but a monster. Astina sadly bows her head and says that in this case, she can kill him without regret. Suddenly, Canna grabs the reins and demands that her sister take her with her. Astina declares that this is completely impossible, but her sister stubbornly insists that she must definitely go. The girl looks at her sister, and after being silent for a moment, coldly declares that she doesn't think so at all. Realizing that she has no other choice, Astina pushes her sister sharply and forcefully, forcing her to let go of the reins. Ignoring her sister's screams, the girl spurs her horse and quickly leaves the academy. In the Atalant mansion, the men gathered at the table discuss that it has been almost a year since the young duke turned into a beast. One of the men says that the 5 people who entered the young man's bedroom died, so they no longer have any hope of an heir. Standing aside, Oliver, the young master's devoted butler, sadly remembers how it all began a year ago. Theriot called the butler and told him that he did not remember the previous night. The young man says that due to frequent attacks, he hardly sleeps at night, but there are no memories. Oliver, realizing what the Duke is talking about, screams in fear that this simply cannot be. The Grand Dukes of Atalanta have changed 15 times in the last 100 years. Among these dukes, 10 died before reaching adulthood, while the remaining 5 completed their terms of office, following their titles. The hereditary disease was that men lost their minds and intellect and turned into monsters. Symptoms begin with cracking skin, hair growing all over the body, and nails turning into claws. Then the situation worsens and the person finally loses his mind, turning into a monster. The man notices that they have lost their vigilance because the gentleman's symptoms began to appear much later than usual. Another man states that if he had known what would happen, he would have worried about the heir in advance. Baron Vernon states that every opportunity must be used, because even animals have the ability to mate. The men begin to scream in horror that the Baron is treating the Duke like a wild animal, and besides, no one would agree to marry a monster. Vernon calmly points out that the case needs to use a family with problems. The Baron declares that he is ready to listen to other proposals, but silence reigns in the hall. The vassal notes that if everything is left as is, Atalanta's house will soon collapse. A month later, Oliver looks out the window and thinks that tomorrow the lady from Reed's house should come to the palace. The man understands that the whole idea is shameless and vulgar, and he did not want to agree with Baron Vernon, but still he hopes for a miracle. Oliver wonders why they decided to send Rita's youngest daughter, who is famous for her intelligence and beauty, instead of her eldest. Suddenly there is a knock on the door and the maids call for the butler. At the entrance, Oliver sees a woman who is almost completely hidden by a cloak. To the surprise of the servants, the girl takes off her hood and asks for forgiveness for arriving earlier than expected. The girl introduces herself as Astina Rita, and she has come to marry the Grand Duke. Oliver is surprised that the girl arrived a day earlier, and even without an escort, but Astina replies that she had her own reasons. The girl says that she should greet everyone properly, but she is so tired that she asks to postpone all the ceremonies until tomorrow. The butler accompanies Astina to her chambers and thinks that the girl is behaving rather strangely, as if she is in a hurry to die. Suddenly, Oliver remembers his duties, bows and says that he is glad to welcome the lady to the Atalanta estate. Astina turns around and says that she is proud to have found the home of the first knight of the Empire. Oliver thinks in shock that he did not expect to hear such a thing from the lips of a young lady. Lying in the hot water, the girl thinks that she feels incredibly tired from the intense rush. Astina reflects that if she had stayed even a little longer, Canna would certainly have followed her. Having rushed home, the girl asked right from the door why her parents were sending her sister away. Astina shouts that her sister doesn't have a chance against the monster, and she will die in vain in his house. The mother falls to her knees and shouts back that if she had had the slightest choice, she would never have given her daughter up to die. The girl angrily declares that she will go instead of Canna, and this is solely her choice, not her parents'. Astina thinks that if her family were poor, then they would have nothing to lose. The girl slowly dresses with the help of the maids and thinks that first she needs to assess the Duke's condition. Astina is not against giving birth to an heir, but if this does not work out, then she will have no choice but to kill him. Early in the morning, Oliver knocks on the doors of the chambers, but the answer is silence. The butler fears that the girl might have run away, but suddenly steps are heard behind him and a female voice asks what happened. The butler turns around and is surprised to notice that Astina managed to return from training at such an early time. Oliver hands the girl an envelope and tells her that it contains a marriage contract. The girl thinks in amazement that she has never heard of such a quick marriage. However, it will be even better for her. Astina enters the chambers, sits down, and begins to carefully read the papers. The lady sadly notes that the name of her first husband, Theriot Van Talent, is surprisingly similar to the name Theodore. Oliver says that the girl needs to read everything carefully and ask questions if she doesn't understand something. Astina hands the surprised butler the papers and says that she has already signed everything. The butler looks at Astina calmly drinking tea and notices that it doesn't look like she was sold to a monster. A little later, a woman who introduces herself as Rebecca Pallet comes to the girl and says that she will help Astina in the matter of her unity with the Duke. The lady thinks that it is very funny to marry a man whom she has never seen, and today she will have to spend her first wedding night. Rebecca sheepishly says that she wants to approach this topic carefully, as she is afraid of hurting the girl's fragile feelings. The woman reports that the main difficulty is that Duke Theriot is now in the form of a wolf. Rebecca says quite seriously that the first wedding night of the young people will take place in a similar guise. Astina distantly thinks that at least the wolf is a beautiful creature. It would be very awkward if the Duke turned out to be a giraffe. Rebecca reports that animal mating is very different from human mating. Astina, not at all embarrassed, asks what exactly the difference is, which greatly confuses the woman. The girl looks out the window. She thought that she had already gone through all the circles of hell, but today she realized that she still had to endure a lot. Astina resolutely goes to the Duke's chambers and thinks that if something goes wrong, she will simply kill him first. For the first time in a long time, the girl feels that she is treated as a means to an end and not as a person. An image of Theodore immediately appears in Astina's head, announcing that he has one last request. Martina is horrified and says that she cannot do what the king asks her to do. The man declares that the girl must do this for the sake of both of them. The girl, with tears in her eyes, asks why Theodore is treating her so cruelly. Astina resolutely pushes away the memories and firmly decides that this is all in the past. Previously, Baron Vernon said that if the girl dies, then all their plans will collapse, so they need to use all means to save the Atalant family. The man takes out a bottle and says that this is a medicine that is used for Animal Crossing. The men begin to pray in horror, but the Baron assures that this will help increase their chances of success. Oliver, who witnessed that conversation, admits to the girl that he is terribly ashamed. Because of his greed, he committed many sins. Astina decisively takes a step towards the Duke's chambers and says that she will finally be able to see her husband. The girl turns to the butler and asks him to smile, because today is a happy wedding day. Astina thinks that she must do everything possible for the money that was promised to her family, and at the same time try not to kill the Duke. An hour later, the old maid tells Oliver that they should let the young maids go, who might be scared by the sight of blood. The servant reports that he has prepared tranquilizers that can put even a wild bear to sleep. The butler listens with fear to the silence outside the door and decides that if nothing happens in an hour, they will have to go inside. Suddenly, the door creaks and Lady Astina appears from the darkness of the room. Shocking the servants, the girl drags the wolf by the paw and reports that they have a small problem. Astina points to the emotionless wolf and says that he has no desire to mate at all. Entering the Duke's room, the girl lights a lantern and examines with displeasure the chaos reigning around. Before the curse, Theodore was considered the most popular bachelor with a very attractive appearance. Walking into the chambers, Astina happily notices a sword hanging on the wall. Taking off the sword, the girl unlocks the lock and enters the cage with the beast. In front of her, on a tattered bedding, lies a huge white wolf with a menacing appearance that truly resembles a monster. The wolf lets out a loud roar, jumps from its place, and rushes straight at the girl. Astina deftly jumps away, dodging the attack, and raises her sword to strike. Stunned by the rebuff, the wolf looks at the girl in surprise, not knowing what else to expect from her. The beast rises to its full height. The fur on it stands on end, and the beast emits a loud roar. The wolf attacks Astina again and again, but each time the girl easily dodges the attacks. The lady understands that the wolf is strong, but he is a beast, and his attack methods are quite simple, so she easily predicts his movements. Having waited for the next jump of the beast, Astina jumps up and strikes him in the stomach with all her strength. The girl looks at the unconscious beast and thinks that as a rival, he is nothing of himself. Astina decides that she needs to complete what she came here for and raises the wolf's hind paw. Suddenly, the beast woke up and looked in amazement at the girl sitting between his legs. Suddenly, the wolf's eyes widen, and he begins to whine pitifully, looking intently at the girl. Walking out of the room, Astina waves her hand and states that the Duke is heavy enough. The lady states that the Duke's condition is much worse than she expected to see. Astina looks at the beast and realizes that he is too weak, and she cannot kill him out of self-defense. According to the marriage contract, the girl must give birth to the Duke's child, but she has no idea what to do if the wolf has no interest in it. After thinking a little, the Duchess orders the butler to bring a strong chain. The girl also says that the room is too dark and dusty. You need to order the servants to clean everything there. Having put a collar and chain on the wolf, Astina takes him out into the garden to the surprise of everyone. The animal calmly and obediently follows the girl. Approaching the tree, the wolf happily stands on its hind legs and begins to eat apples. As Astina thought, fresh air and activity are necessary, and it doesn't matter whether for a person or an animal. The Duchess suggests that the beast's self-esteem could have suffered significantly from being cooped up and alone for so long. The maids look out the window and cannot believe their eyes. Not only did the girl survive, she also tamed the monster. One of the maids dreamily says that this whole scene reminds her of a fairy tale about beauty and the beast. Another girl sarcastically says that the whole scene looks more like a housewife and her pet. At the other window, the maid looks angrily at the Duchess and wonders why she survived. The girl puts her hand to her stomach and thinks that if everything does not go according to plan, then she will be finished. Canna hasn't gotten out of bed for a week now. Her worried friends are trying to console the girl and feed her. Canna painfully thinks that her sister decided to die for her, and she herself turned out to be a coward and was afraid to live on her own. Arriving home, the girl learned from her parents that Astina had already left for the duchy. Canna sobbed uncontrollably. Her mother blamed her father for everything, and all he could do was pray. The girl covers her mouth with her hand, thinking that her little sister is most likely already dead. Suddenly, one of the students hands Canna an envelope and says that a letter has arrived from the duchy. The girl grabs the letter and starts reading, and her friend advises her to take the day off and go home. After reading the letter, Canna throws it aside, jumps out of bed, and starts running. The sister informs everyone that she is fine and asks Canna not to worry that she is not the one who got married. The girl runs down the corridor, remembering her sister's words that she will do everything possible to return home in about a year. Canna was so deep in her thoughts that she didn't notice the student coming towards her and ran straight into him. The young man says that his name is Benjamin Leandros, and he often sparred with Astina. The student anxiously asks if it is true that the girl married Duke Theodore. Benjamin shakes his hand and says with a smile that Astina has a special tactic that makes the loser feel humiliated. The girl wipes her sweat with her hand and advises the young man to study more and not waste time on empty talk. The guy notices that his friend is a talented fencer, but then why does she have such a terrible weapon? Astina directly states to her instantly embarrassed friend that unfortunately she has no money. The lady admits that her family is against fencing, so she could only buy this poor sword with the pocket money she saved. Benjamin walks down the corridor, carrying a brand new sword in his hands, a gift for Astina, when he suddenly stumbles upon gossiping students. The guy freezes and hears that the girl's family actually sold her to the Duke, with whom a marriage contract had already been signed. The student is horrified to learn that her friend's husband is the very famous Duke Theodore. Canna clenches her fists and tells Benjamin that these are not rumors, but the pure truth. The girl, with tears in her eyes, tells the student that her sister went to the duchy in her place. Benjamin is stunned by the news. Until the last moment, he hoped that these were just stupid rumors. Suddenly, Canna shouts that despite everything, her sister is alive. She just received a letter from her parents. The girl says it's time for her to go and get ready to go home. Benjamin is glad that Astina is okay. But everything happened so suddenly. What is really happening? Meanwhile, the Duchess carefully studies the books, learning very useful information, and gradually begins to understand the basics of training. The girl looks at the wolf, extends her hand to him, and decisively tells him to give him his paw. The beast growls, and then quite noticeably hits Astina on her outstretched palm. The girl realizes that the wolf quite deliberately hit her hand and wonders whether this can be considered fulfilling an order. The beast rises to its paws and bares its teeth. Astina realizes that he still has a bad attitude towards her. The girl gets up, calmly approaches the wolf, and in a quiet voice orders him to sit. The beast gnaws the bone and does not even look in the direction of the Duchess, completely ignoring her order. Astina thinks that it is not easy for an animal to understand her voice orders without guidance from her hand. The girl puts her hand on the wolf's shoulder and presses lightly, making it clear what exactly she wants from him. After a couple of minutes, the beast sits down. Astina happily praises him for his good work. The Duchess strokes the wolf's head and thinks that by being trained, he will be able to live among people after she leaves this place. The girl looks at the animal, which reminds her very much of Theodora, and decides to temporarily call the wolf Theo. Suddenly, Baron Vernon appears in the garden, who angrily says that although the Duke is now out of his mind, he is nevertheless the girl's husband. Oliver informs the perplexed Duchess that this is Baron Vernon, one of the Duke's vassals. The girl says with a grin that she considered the Baron capable only of intrigue behind his back, but he has finally shown himself. Turning away, Astina says that as expected, the man has no shame. The Baron thinks with amazement that this little trash still dares to be insolent, pretending to be a duchess, although she was simply sold for money. The girl angrily says that the Baron should remember more often who she is, and not act as if he were her overlord. Astina approaches Vernon and says that the Baron is not showing his respect to the Duke with his arrogant rudeness. The girl reaches out her hand and scratches the wolf's chin, which delights the beast. Astina states that until the Duke comes to his senses, she is the head of the family, and the Baron should not forget about this the next time he decides to cross the line. Vernon stubbornly says that her actions are offensive to his lordship, and he, as his vassal, cannot turn a blind eye to this. The Duchess says that it is funny to hear such words from the one who locked the Duke in a cage and gave the order for his reproduction. Oliver watches the young woman with admiration and does not understand where such self-confidence came from in her. Astina pats the Baron on the shoulder and says that if he understands his place, he can go. The Duchess asks the butler what the Baron forgot in the castle, to which Oliver replies that today there is a meeting of vassals. The girl turns sharply and asks why she doesn't know anything about this. Oliver replies that the Duke himself has always attended these meetings, but Astina declares that it is time to change these rules. Leading the wolf by the leash, the Duchess heads towards the castle and remarks that it is time for her to strengthen her authority. The Duchess writes something and tells the butler to give her a stamp, which he uses instead of the Duke's signature. Oliver obediently holds out the seal, wondering with interest what her ladyship is up to. The girl extends her hand to Theo, who is lying on the floor, and orders him to give him his paw. Having placed a seal in the wolf's paw, Astina deftly stamps it on all prepared documents. Oliver leans over to the girl and asks permission to ask what kind of documents these are. The Duchess reads that by this document, Theodore van Atalanta completely trusts his wife for the period of the marriage contract. Theo Astina attaches the sword to his back, rightly deciding that it would definitely not be superfluous in the current state of affairs. Oliver understands that the vassals will not be delighted that the Duchess stole the seal, but he really wants to see what she is up to. After listening to Vernon, one of the vassals declares that her ladyship does not know her place and does not understand how she owes them everything. The Baron angrily reports that he has never been so humiliated before. The men discuss that Reet's family would have been on the verge of death if not for them, but the young lady decided that she now had power. Oliver respectfully opens the door, and the Duchess enters the hall, leading Theo next to her. The girl sits down and says that her name is Astina van Atalanta, and she is very glad to see everyone present. Baron Vernon jumps out of his chair and asks what her ladyship is doing at the meeting. Astina asks with a grin if the owner of this house needs a reason to check what belongs to her. The Baron angrily says that the lady cannot be the mistress of this house while his lordship is alive. The Duchess shows everyone the power of attorney and declares that she refuses to accept any objections unless they come from the Duke himself. Astina turns to the wolf and asks if everything suits him. Theo, in response, looks at the girl devotedly. The girl returns to her chambers and reflects that even from one vassal, one could conclude that they are all the same here. The Duchess orders Oliver to bring her all the reports on the state of affairs in the duchy. The butler looks at his mistress with admiration. He has never seen such women, and if Empress Martina were alive, then she would probably be exactly the same. Meanwhile, in the capital, Benjamin tells his father that he plans to take a break from his studies and go to the Duchy of Atalanta. The young man says that Astina got married because of her parents' debts, and if she is doing this under duress, then he must save her. The man wonders if his son has some cunning plan to force the girl to divorce the Duke. The guy says that he needs to apply all his legal knowledge to nullify the marriage, and if this does not help, then he will have only one way out. Benjamin sadly says that Astina is not only a friend to him, and memories of their acquaintance immediately arise in his head. 6 years ago, a student was walking across the square when he suddenly saw a crowd of people and loud screams. Coming closer, the guy learned that some girl was trying to fight Adolf for her right to use the training ground. Benjamin sees a small young girl and wonders how she had the determination to pick a fight with a local strongman. The girl states that all students at the academy have the privilege of using the training grounds. Adolf looks at the girl with a grin and tells her to get lost while she's still alive. The lady coldly remarks that it is unlikely that someone who judges only by appearance will be able to become a wise knight. Astina advises the guy to change his teacher, since the knightly nobility he learned is so low grade. Benjamin notices that although the girl speaks strangely, she does not yield a single word to her opponent. Adolf invites Astina to show what she can do and chop the logs lying behind him. Suddenly, the lady throws a glove at the guy's face and declares that she, Astina Rete, challenges him to a duel. Adolf raises his sword over his head, hoping that the girl will not be able to withstand his blow with such small hands. Astina easily blocks the attack, leaving the strong man completely bewildered. Suddenly, the guy's sword slips and the girl presses her sword to his throat. After a couple of moments, Astina sheathes her sword and tells Adolf not to appear on the site while she is there. Suddenly, the guy bursts into tears, and the girl embarrassedly thinks that she went a little too far. Surprised, Benjamin approaches Astina, introduces himself, and says that he is glad to meet you. Student says that he saw everything, and the girl's skill amazed him, so he also wants to fight with her. Seeing the lady's confusion, the guy admits that he is counting on her, since there are few people in the academy who are as good with a sword. Astina changes her anger to mercy, shakes hands with Benjamin, and says that she will gladly train with him. A month later, the young people are studying hard, and the guy notices with a grin that after that incident, Adolf is no longer visible. Astina silently chops logs. Benjamin asks in surprise why the girl studies so hard if she is studying at the Faculty of Political Science. The lady calmly replies that she is just strengthening herself because it is too dangerous to be weak. Benjamin reveals that he takes up fencing because he once failed to protect someone who needed it. The girl replies that in this case the guy needs to become even stronger and offers to raise his sword. The student sheepishly admits that Astina's manner of speaking makes him involuntarily want to bend his knee. The young man looks at the sword made especially for the girl and decisively thinks that no matter what, he will come to her aid. Baron Vernon furiously thinks that if his plan had succeeded, then the next 3 generations could live happily ever after, but the impudent girl ruins all his plans. The Duke's vassals drooled over his enormous fortune and became even bolder when their master turned into a monster. They believed that if they managed to preserve the family, at least formally, then the next 20 years would belong to them. This was the case until the appearance of Astina, who declared that she herself would take care of the Duke. One of the men declares that the Duchess is just a woman, and it will be enough to intimidate her properly. Vernon suggests starting a scandalous rumor that the Duke's wife disappeared in the dead of night. The Baron receives approval from other vassals and says that they need to think about who can kidnap the Duchess. Suddenly, the door to the hall swings open, and a man runs in shouting that they are in big trouble. Ignoring the dissatisfaction of the vassals with such a strange appearance, the man reports that Baronet Ardell has been arrested. An hour earlier, Astilla was sitting in the Duke's office studying papers. From the documents, it is quite clearly clear that things are going very badly on the estate, and most of the money ends up in the pockets of the manager. Oliver reports that if her ladyship wishes to see the manager, then Baronet Ardell is standing at the mansion. The butler says that the man came early in the morning to protest to her ladyship, but he decided not to let him into the mansion. The Duchess notices that all this is very interesting, and calling Theo, offers to go and look at the baronet. The wolf faithfully puts his paw on the girl's hand, and Oliver thinks with amazement that before no one even thought of coming closer to him. When the Duke becomes too much of a pet, the butler experiences mixed feelings, but above all, relief. Astina tells Oliver to take the knights as an escort and bring Baronet Ardell to her. Sometime later, the knights bring a man into the office who desperately resists. The man angrily shouts that the Duchess is compromising social norms, and he, as his lordship's vassal, is no longer able to tolerate her dictatorship. Astina coldly says that she did not call the baronet because of the strike he staged in front of the mansion. Suddenly, an account book falls in front of the man, and he, realizing what this threatens, asks in horror what it is. The Duchess menacingly declares that if Ardell is so incompetent, he will lose his title, but if he understood everything, he must be punished. The baronet bows his head and begs for mercy, admits that he could not resist greed. Astina thoughtfully taps her fingers on the table and thinks that small fry are all like that. She hasn't seen anything new. The baronet pleadingly says that for 10 years he has devotedly served the public good. The girl states that someone who has been convicted of misappropriation of funds has no right to talk about loyalty. The baronet tearfully says that he has a wife and children whom he must feed. The Duchess reflects that the crime is not really that serious. Ardell continues that he could not support a family with a baronetcy, which is not even inherited. Suddenly, Theo stands up and, growling menacingly, walks towards the baronet, who begins to shake in horror. Astina looks down at the man and says that she will consider reducing his sentence if he tells her everything he knows. Next to the huge wolf, the Duchess looks completely fragile, the greater the amazement of those around her that she was able to tame the beast. The maids gossip that Astina managed to completely clean up the vassals who were stealing from the master. Thanks to the confessions of Baronet Ardell, all the vassals who plundered the treasury were detained. The leader was the one who had the most influence since the Duke turned into a monster. Oliver guessed that there were embezzlers, but now no one would dare to cross the shrewd Duchess. The maids in the kitchen are discussing that Baron Vernon will now never get out of prison for the rest of his life, and Eliza's situation has become simply ridiculous. One of the girls says with a laugh that that's what she needed. There was no point in counting on anyone standing up for her. The maids say that Eliza is the same maid, but having decided to follow the Baron, she simply sat on their neck. Eliza limps into the kitchen and angrily asks what the girls are talking about. Suddenly, the girl approaches one of the maids and slaps her in the face with all her might. Eliza is shaking with rage, and the girls are screaming that she has completely lost her mind. The girl angrily declares that this will happen to anyone who dares to unceremoniously discuss others. The maid approaches Eliza and shouts that now her antics have come to an end because the Baron has been arrested. Eliza screams in tears to be left alone and runs out of the kitchen. The maids look at each other in confusion. Are the rumors that there was a close relationship between the girl and the Baron true? 4 months ago, despite Eliza's statements that she had a fiancé, the Baron assured that the position of his mistress would bring great benefits to the girl. The man's speeches were skillful. He was very affectionate with the girl, and in the end, she stopped resisting. The fact that she was now desecrated weighed heavily on Eliza, and she wrote to her fiancé about the separation and cut off contact with her parents. The girl became irritable. Even minor things made her angry, and sometime later, Eliza found out that she would soon have a child. One day, Vernon said that the owner's place in the house was empty, and the girl could do him a favor if she got some information. Hearing the refusal, the Baron said that he would leave her, and a lonely girl with a child in her arms would not have a quiet life anywhere. Eliza tried every way she knew to get rid of the child. However, by the will of the Lord, a new life continued to develop in Eliza. The maid began to work much slower and worse, and one day a rag flew into her face. The other maids began to blame Eliza that because of her slowness, they had much more work to do. The girl attacked aggressively in response to the claims. Rage simply overwhelmed her. Eliza came to Vernon and declared that she would do whatever he asked her to do if the man would protect her. Vernon put his hand on the maid's shoulder and said that he was confident in her choice. From that day on, the Baron took the girl under his protection. She felt the taste of power, and at such moments her sadness receded. The Baron continued to put psychological pressure on Eliza, saying that he loved her, and they had their whole life ahead of them. 4 months later, Astina appeared at the castle, and all the couple's plans collapsed overnight. The beautiful Duchess, just like in the old fairy tales, tamed the monster. In an instant, Astina seized power and took control of the estate and sent all the corrupt vassals to prison. Eliza understands that most likely she and the child will be thrown out of the castle, and if she returns to the village, they will stone her, calling her a whore. Arriving at the dungeon, the girl decides to beg the Baron for at least some money in any way she can. Vernon states that he knew that the girl would come to visit him. The Baron reaches through the bars and tells her to take what he has in his fist. The man unclenches his fist, and Eliza sees a strange glass vial. The Baron says that it is poison. Vernon tells Eliza to add poison to the Duchess's tea. This is the only way so that both he and the girl can survive. The maid resolutely refuses, but the Baron says that if he dies, then she will not have life anyway. Eliza sadly realizes that if she does not follow Vernon's words, she will soon die too. A few days later, Eliza comes into the office with a tray and says that she has prepared tea for her ladyship. The Duchess pauses, pets Theo affectionately, and asks if he would like something to chew. Suddenly, Astina turns to the maid and notices that her belly has grown. Eliza does not have time to say a word, and the Duchess calmly says that it is better for a girl not to get what she has hidden in her sleeve. Astina calmly reports that if Eliza wants to poison her, then the poison should have been poured in advance. The maid falls exhausted to the floor and begs her ladyship to spare her. The Duchess looks at the maid and asks if she really proposes to leave the one who tried to harm on the sly in the mansion. Eliza begins to confess that she is carrying the child of Baron Vernon, who has been arrested. The maid sadly says that the lady should know what happens to a woman who gives birth to a child without a husband. Eliza screams in despair that she was too scared by everything that happened and just wanted to survive. Astina takes the poison from the girl and releases her, saying that she will call her when she is needed. At the tavern, the owner tells Benjamin that he was very lucky to get into the last free room. The student reflects that the journey to Adelant will take 5 days, even if he rides without rest, so he simply needs to replenish his strength. Suddenly, the young man hears loud female screams asking the men to stop and not do what they shouldn't do. Turning around, Benjamin sees the maid scolding the man for groping her. Hearing the visitor's excuses, the guy thinks that people like him always say the same thing. Benjamin realizes that he cannot leave the woman in trouble and decisively intervenes in the scandal. An absolutely drunk man stands up from behind the counter and staggers, saying that it's not knightly to treat women like that. The men freeze in amazement and try to understand who decided to interfere in their affairs. Hisaying looks at the men with contempt and states that he learned swordsmanship from a famous young lady. The company begins to laugh loudly at the fact that a huge man learned to wield a sword from some girl. Benjamin freezes and listens carefully to the drunkard's words. The student asks if the knight is talking about Rita. Heisen turns around and asks how the guy knows the name of his mistress. Suddenly, the man becomes enraged and attacks the young man, accusing him of being a spy. Astina looms over the kneeling man and asks if he knows why he was brought. Baron Vernon looks up at the girl and says that he does not understand what happened. Noticing Eliza, the Baron angrily thinks that she set him up, tying him hand and foot. The maid confessed to the Duchess everything that she had to endure, how the Baron had dishonored her, and then wanted to leave her. Most of the residents of Carabella believe that one should marry the one who took away the virginity. But Vernon not only did not take responsibility for the child, but also used her, forcing her to kill her ladyship. Astina tells the Baron that the real animal was not the owner, but his servant. The man starts shouting that Eliza is lying all the time. She is a slutty girl, and she cheated on a child from no one knows who. Vernon rushes towards the girl and shouts that she has disgraced his honor. Twisted by the knights, the Baron changes tactics and says that no matter what, he sincerely loves Eliza. Astina approaches the man and coldly asks what this information has to do with what he did. The Duchess says that not only is the man accused of extravagance, but he also dared to encroach on her life. Astina states that the child's expenses will be deducted from Baron Vernon's confiscated property. The girl tells Eliza that this will be a lifelong compensation, and she admits the guilt of the owner, who failed to keep track of his maid. Turning to the Baron, her ladyship reports that the death sentence will be carried into effect in 3 days. Elise Astina says that although the girl did everything under pressure, she is not innocent either. The Duchess declares that she cannot leave in the castle the one who tried to harm her mistress and expels her from the duchy. Realizing that she remains alive and with a livelihood, the maid sincerely thanks Astina for believing her words. The girl remembers that at one time she did everything to take revenge and survive. She gritted her teeth and obeyed Waldo's order to spend the night together. But Astina never felt that she had tarnished herself with this, because in the end, she took full revenge on her enemies. Looking at Eliza, the Duchess thinks with regret that not all women are capable of this. Benjamin tells Hisaying that he is not a spy. He studies with Miss Astina at the same academy. Suddenly, the knight begins to sob loudly and admits that he misses his mistress very much and cannot believe that she got married so early. The men, in bewilderment, say that the knight and the guy picked on them, and now they are making jokes, which means they both need to be taught a lesson. The big man runs up to Heeson, who is sitting on the floor, and raises his leg to strike. A few moments later, the man and the guy stand over their defeated rivals and shake hands as they introduce themselves. The men kneel as Benjamin orders them to apologize to the woman. The maid looks angrily at the guilty ones and asks permission to give them a good whack too. The student and the knight look at each other in bewilderment, but agree that she has the right to do this. A few minutes later, the men have a new pile of bumps and bruises. The maid cheerfully thanks the men and says that they are real knights and protectors. Benjamin turns to the offenders and says that if they decide to take revenge on the woman, he will return again and will not remain on the sidelines. Heisen pats the guy on the shoulder and offers him a glass of drink, since fate itself brought them together. The knight notes that we still need to wait out the rain, and he has a couple of interesting stories about Miss Astina's younger years. 3 days later, by order of the Duchess, Baron Vernon was executed, and Eliza left the Grand Duke's castle. Many believe that the maid received too lenient a punishment, but Astina took into account the situation of the victim before committing the crime and generously released her. It rains nonstop for 2 days, and the girl and Theo spend all their time in the office. But even indoor games have a limit. The wolf clearly does not have enough walks. Oliver hands the girls papers and says that this is a list of property confiscated from Baron Vernon. The butler reports that his family members have barricaded themselves in the mansion and refuse to leave. The old head of the family rebels, saying that he does not intend to lose everything because of the servant's fraud. Astina sighs tiredly and tells him to tell the old man that he will be thoroughly interrogated about concealing the Baron's other crimes. Oliver shudders at the girl's words, that she can at any moment allow him to taste the gift sent to her by the Baron. Astina is one of those people who are confident that everyone should receive what they deserve. The Duchess is strict, but treats her subordinates kindly, but is infinitely merciless towards those who cross her. The stupid vassals did not take into account the peculiarities of her ladyship's character and opposed her, thereby prompting her to act. There's a knock on the door, and the maid reports that the Duchess has guests. Oliver says, puzzled, that there have been no letters announcing the visits. Completely wet, Benjamin and Hyson happily tell how they accidentally ran into each other in a tavern and decided to visit their mistress together. The girl drinks tea and notices that after such a journey in the pouring rain, the men should immediately wash themselves. Benjamin exclaims that their appearance is completely unimportant, asking her to finally tell what happened to her. Astina calmly reports that she just got married and Benjamin probably already heard about it. The young man notices that the Duchess looks completely adjusted and calm. Sir Hiseng begins to cry again. A surprised Benjamin asks if he is okay. Astina indifferently reports that it is obvious that the knight went into a deep binge, and this state is normal for him. Hiseng says that his heart is breaking because of the young lady's early wedding. In response to the student's remark that the knight missed her, the girl says with a grin that he just likes to drink. Astina recalls that when she took his family heirloom from Sir, he went on a drinking binge out of sadness, and when she returned it, he threw a party to celebrate. When Hisan was taken away, Benjamin seriously says that he was sure that the girl was forced into the wedding. Astina honestly says that for Canna, this would be coercion, but for her, it is just an acceptable bargaining that would not allow her family to go bankrupt. Suddenly, the girl begins to wonder if everything is okay with Theo. She felt sorry for locking him up, so she decided to just leave him in the office. Astina realizes with surprise that she has become attached to the wolf, and when he falls out of her sight, she begins to worry. The girl treats Theo like an unreasonable child and reflects that loneliness could well be to blame for his past insanity. Benjamin firmly states that if Astina's marriage is against her will, then he will get her out of here. The girl is confused and says that the young man only has the title of baronet, awarded for passing certification. So what forces does he want to help her with? The young man declares that he can do anything if Astina gives her consent to it. The Duchess looks at her fellow student with bewilderment to see if his determination hides feelings for her. Benjamin reports that he knows about the lady's strength, but it is impossible to foresee all circumstances. The guy, in the heat of the moment, asks how he can be sure that the monster won't harm her. So that the young man can be calm about her, Astina decides to show him Theo. The door opens slightly, and Benjamin notices with a shiver the silhouette of the monster duke. The light comes on, and the guy sees how a huge wolf on its hind legs meets its owner and joyfully wags its tail. Clinging to the beast, Astina says that this is Duke Theriot, whom she calls Theo. Benjamin is full of embarrassment. This is clearly not the kind of monster he expected to see. The young man is discouraged, which means Astina really married the beast. The girl invites the young man to take a sabbatical and work for the Atalanta family. Benjamin looks at the girl in confusion. Is this really what his help should be? The Duchess says that during the Duke's absence, the situation in the estate is sad and she needs help. The young man listens with sadness that Astina will be glad to receive such a competent specialist like him. Benjamin came here for completely different purposes and not to condemn the fate of the estate. The guy looks at the wolf and thinks that he could accept the fact that Astina met a worthy person, but certainly not a beast. The student asks what will happen if he refuses. Instead of answering, the girl gives Theo the command to face. Benjamin jumps up in fright, not believing that his girlfriend is doing this to him. Theo lies calmly at the Duchess's feet and does not react in any way to her strange order. The girl laughingly says that she was joking and did not teach the wolf such commands. The guy is simply discouraged. Astina reports that in exchange for covering her family's debts, she must give birth to an heir, and after that, she plans to divorce the Duke. Benjamin jumps up in horror. He never expected to hear this. The young man looks at his girlfriend in despair. He is ready to immediately grab her hand and take her away from here. The student wonders if now is the right time to confess his feelings. The young man tells Astina that he believes her and has always been so, and the girl asks if he will accept her proposal. Benjamin says emphatically that he always wanted to give the girl a little more. The Duchess does not understand why she is looking at Benjamin, and before her eyes is her faithful assistant, right hand, Elito, a reliable and close friend who remained with Martina even on her deathbed. Realizing that the guy will not stay, the girl warmly thanks him for his concern. Benjamin says that he will always wait for Astina, and she can return to him at any time. The Duchess says that leaving like that right away is very reckless, to which the guy laughingly says that she is not the only one to do such things. Astina wishes the young man a good journey and asks him to be careful. Sir Hyson says goodbye to the guy and admits that he was very glad to meet them. Having spurred his horse, Benjamin decides to return not just to the capital, but to go straight to the Emperor. A few days later, Astina and Hyson arrive at Baron Vernon's former mansion to check on the work going on there. The girl tells the knight to stay here and strictly monitor this place. If the man does well, then perhaps they can return to training. Sir Hyson is clearly upset, but the Duchess says with a grin that he will have to put down his sword for a while. Astina confidently says that people need to be used in the right place. The Baron's father bursts into the gate and shouts that this place belonged to the Vernon family and was passed down from generation to generation. The girl orders the knight to bring the old man. No one has the right to interfere with the Duchess's instructions. Vernon continues to scream and tries to open the gate, shaking it violently. Once on the castle grounds, the old man falls on his face and begs her ladyship to listen to him. The man says that his son's crime is huge and he has been punished. But how should the rest of his family feed now? The old man lowers his head even lower and says that his death is not terrible, but there are many small children on it. Astina says that she will not allow her to be taken for a fool. She knows very well where Baron Vernon got the poison from while in prison. The girl reports that suspicious money transfers were received in the name of the Baron's father. 2 days after the arrest, Vernon's wife filed a request to see her husband. The old man looks at the Duchess with fear and tries to convince her that this simply cannot be. Astina contemptuously reports that she left the Baron's family alive, only to watch how they would climb out of the bottom. The Duchess warns that if the old man makes a noise again, she will make sure that he won't even carry his feet. Suddenly, the man jumps up from his knees and shouts that the girl is just shameless trash. Hyson shields the Duchess and orders the old man not to approach her. A distraught Vernon shouts that Astina's only purpose is to bear a man's seed, and her death will be pitiful. The old man shouts that the curse placed on the Duke will also consume the girl's son. Astina immediately thinks that her husband's hereditary disease is too unusual, and the idea of mystical power came to her mind. The Duchess approaches Vernon and asks what he knows about the curse. Instead of answering, the old man hatefully spits in the girl's face. The man laughs and only says that the girl's husband will never be saved. The knight gives the girl a handkerchief, and she, looking at Vernon, coldly remarks that he underestimates her. The Duchess says that infidelity is a facet that cannot be left unnoticed and orders the old man to be thrown into prison. Hyson notices with amazement that his mistress took the insult inflicted on her too easily. Astina's past life was too difficult for her to remain susceptible to such things. Lying in bed, the Duchess thinks that if the Duke has been cursed, there must be a way to lift it. Noticing that his owner is upset, Theo begins to lick her face. The girl gently strokes the wolf, notes that he has become quite obedient, then tenderly kisses him on the forehead. At night, Astina suddenly opens her eyes and feels the presence of a person nearby. Turning around sharply, the girl sees that an unfamiliar man is sleeping on the bed next to her. The Duchess looks at the young man in bewilderment and notices a collar around his neck, but Theo is nowhere to be found. Astina does not understand what is happening. There are no signs of a break-in, and judging by the collar, the Duke himself is clearly in front of her. The girl carefully turns the man onto his back and is amazed to see that he bears a striking resemblance to Theodore. On the day of the coronation, Theodore tells Martina, who appeared, that he was sure that she had disappeared from the palace. The girl indifferently says that she has fulfilled her lifelong desire, so there is no point in running away. The man admits that he locked the doors of the hall with the thought of getting rid of the witch, and she should understand this. Martina sadly says that she did not expect anything good from a person from the Blanche family. The king wonders what will happen if he orders the death of a girl who has become useless to him. Martina indifferently says that in this situation, there will be one more royal heads that she will cut down. Theodore notes that there is nothing that the girl cannot do, but that is not what he wants. Martina hears that, appreciating her merits, the king grants her the title of Marquise and a new surname. The girl admits that she helped the king for a personal reason, and there is nothing more that she wants to receive. Theodore says that Martina can ask him for anything her heart desires. The girl sadly understands that even after destroying the monster, the dead cannot be brought back, and says that she has no reason to live. The king looks at the girl softly and says that he is naming her with the name of the clan. From now on, Martina Owen de Leta must live for the sake of her king. Astina looks at the man and thinks that he is incredibly similar to the king. Could it be that Theodore was also reborn? The young man begins to moan and, gradually coming to his senses, opens his eyes. Suddenly, the girl pulls the leash with all her might, which instantly brings the Duke to his senses. Astina squeezes the collar with force and in a rage asks the young man who he is. Distraught, Astina whispers, turning to Theodore, that after his departure, she lived every day as if in hell. The girl admits that not an hour passed when she was not angry with the king and did not forget him for a single moment. Astina, in tears, says that Theodore forced her to cut his throat, and now he has the nerve to return to her. The girl screams, pressing herself to the boy's face, that Theodore is a terrible and cruel person, and she curses him. Astina then whispers that she still loves her king and kisses him passionately on the lips. A hereditary disease in the Adelant family manifested itself before the age of 20, and the heir received recognition only after reaching adulthood. The Duke's parents have already lost 2 children from a terrible hereditary disease. That is why mother and father did not show feelings of affection for Theodore, who was born the youngest. Thinking that the disease would suddenly manifest itself, the boy was never allowed out of the mansion. To all the child's requests to go outside the castle, the father replied that there was enough everything in his room. The boy did not understand why this was happening, because he so dreamed of looking at the sea. But the Duke remained adamant and simply left the room, not wanting to see his son suffer. Theodore studied all kinds of sciences and even fencing without leaving home. By the time he came of age, the young man had grown into a duke, as if he had stepped out of a painting. Only after 20 years did the father and mother open their arms for their son. The young man cried, saying that now he could not be afraid to wonder if he would go crazy. Theodore learned to manage the family's affairs, because it was his duty to inherit the family name and continue the family line as quickly as possible. After a while, the young duke completed his studies and was already accustomed to the work he performed in place of his father. But one day, terrible news came. The Duke and Duchess's carriage fell into the abyss. At his parents' funeral, Theodore thought with despair that he didn't know how to grieve. The young man often wondered whether he could live the life of an ordinary person. He said that he could not even imagine himself with a child in his arms. Oliver often invited Theodore to look at portraits of girls, but the young man did not want to see them. Eventually, he began to show symptoms of the disease that nearly wiped out the Atallant family. The disease made the gentle Duke cruel, increasing the time he lost his sanity. The vassals wanted to find a girl and marry the Duke before the opportunity to continue the family line was lost. Upon learning of this, Theodore shouted in rage that they were turning him into livestock. The young man, in a fit of anger, yelled that for them he was not a man, but a thoroughbred stallion. One night, the Duke gave Oliver his last order so that he could not harm anyone. Theodore asks to lock him up. Having come to his senses, the Duke was amazed to find a girl right in front of him, crying and whispering that she still loved him. When the stranger kissed Theodore, he could not understand whether he was sleeping or had already died. The Duke sits up in bed and asks which man the girl keeps talking about and who she is. Astina freezes for a moment and suddenly realizes that it is not Theodore in front of her. The Duke angrily says that if a girl values her life, then she should identify herself and explain what she is doing with him in the same room. The girl abruptly jumps off the bed and quickly runs out of the room in tears. The young man discovers that he was lying completely naked and, throwing a blanket over his shoulders, looked at the room in surprise. Suddenly, Oliver runs into the chambers, feels the master, and thanks God for returning to his former appearance. Theodore admits that he doesn't understand a damn thing about what's going on here, and asks who the girl who was with him in the chambers is. The butler is silent for a while, and then says that it was Her Grace, the Duchess. The young man looks at Oliver in amazement. Was that girl really his wife? After the butler says that everything was done for the sake of the heir, the Duke realizes that nothing has changed. Theodore asks in surprise how that girl managed to survive, to which Oliver declares that she is very special. The Duke orders that clothes be brought to him, and then go to the office to look at current affairs. According to the butler, it turned out that the Duke had been absent for a little less than a year. The young man quickly goes to the office, sadly noting that most likely things on the estate have fallen into complete disrepair, and asks where Baronet Ardell is. Noticing that Oliver is embarrassedly silent and ignoring his question, the Duke turns around in surprise. The butler says that the baronet was suspected of embezzlement, removed from his post, and is now under arrest in his home. Theodore tries to digest the information received and says that in this case, the matter should be entrusted to Baron Vernon. Oliver reports that the Baron was executed on charges of attempting to kill the Duchess. The Duke orders the butler to bring him a documentary list to his office in order to understand what is happening here. Entering the office, Theodore sees significant changes and asks in bewilderment why it smells so much like dog. Oliver wipes the sweat from his forehead and decides to say that it was not the dog who lived here, but the Duke himself. The young man sighs tiredly and does not understand what to do with everything that happened in his absence. Meanwhile, Astina runs out into the garden and begins to scream loudly in complete despair. The girl wonders in horror why the one with whom she is married is like two peas in a pod like Theodore. Theodore carefully studies the documents, amazed at how brazenly and openly he was robbed. Turning to Oliver, the young man asks in amazement whether Baron Vernon also intimidated the maid. Looking at the papers, the Duke lists the Baron's crimes, including theft and attempted murder. The young man is in complete confusion because the Vernon family remained with Adelant from generation to generation. Theodore notes that the Baron was known as a caring husband, and he simply cannot believe everything that happened. Oliver sheepishly says that the servants in the castle are the type of people who only tell stories among themselves. The Duke sadly reflects that until now he has not cared about the personal lives of his vassals. The guy doesn't understand how to deal with the feeling of betrayal that he experienced for the first time in his life. The butler says that at the behest of the Duchess, the maid was expelled, but the Baron's property was given to her as compensation. Theodore declares that he has had enough of court records and asks for reports on hydraulic structures. After a while, the Duke is surprised to realize that everything is functioning as it should. Turning to the butler, the young man asks if they used the services of a deputy. Oliver proudly replies that Her Grace the Duchess was in charge of everything. Early in the morning, turmoil begins in the castle as soon as everyone finds out that their master has returned to his former appearance. The vassals discuss the news in alarm, not believing that the Duke has truly recovered from his illness. The nobles are afraid that the master will believe his wife's words about their theft and become furious. Oliver enters the chambers and looks at the Duke in amazement, asking what he is eating. Theodore chews a piece of meat and asks if the Duchess really likes such a snack. The young man notices that girls usually hide cookies in their desk drawers, but he found beef jerky. Oliver looks at the master puzzled, realizing that he can't muster up the courage to tell him the truth. Oliver doesn't understand how one can talk about the fact that the young man was on a leash with his wife and followed all her commands. Changing the subject, the servant says that the vassals want to see the Duke. They have gathered at the gate and demand a meeting. Theodore is not sure that the situation will be resolved without bloodshed, but he wants to hear what excuses the vassals will spin with their boneless tongues. As he heads out, the Duke asks the butler to find out where the Duchess is, because he hasn't seen her since last night. Oliver remembers that when Astina told him the news, she looked strange, but still she is not the kind of person who can run away like that. Perhaps the girl was shocked to see the beast turn into a man. Suddenly, Theodore turns to Oliver and asks him for a favor. The young man reports that he thought all morning and came to the conclusion that he should thank the Duchess for everything. But first of all, the Duke wants to find out how his wife was able to survive with the beast and deal with all matters perfectly. Remembering the night, the guy wonders why the girl strangled him and burst into tears. Looking out the window, Theodore again returns to the question of how he was able to return to his previous appearance. At the last moment that the young man remembers, he was sure that he was taking his last breath of air. The Duke will never be able to forget the feeling of being drowned in a swamp from which it is impossible to swim out. The Duke and the guards approach the front gate and declare that in front of him are faces that he has not seen for a long time. The vassals greet the master with delight and declare that they want to tell him a lot. The young man calmly wonders if the story will be about how they, like rats, ate Adeline's storeroom. The nobles are embarrassed and declare that the Duke was misled, but he should not doubt their sincerity. Theodore states that he trusted men, and this was a huge mistake, which he admits to himself. The vassals declare that it was a mistake on their part to choose a villainess as their wife, and they ask for forgiveness for this. Approaching the gate, the Duke threateningly asks if the vassals enjoyed the festival of outrages without the owner. The nobles demand that the villain who has clouded their master's head be brought to them, and they will personally deal with her. With annoyance, the young man asks if there is anyone more arrogant than the vassals who betrayed their master. The men begin to shout that they heard how an inhuman woman dared to train His Grace the Duke. At the house, Oliver is surprised to hear that the servants cannot find the Duchess anywhere. The butler thoughtfully wonders where the lady could be if she is not in the house. Theodore asks what the men mean, perhaps that the Duchess controlled a beast that kills people. With annoyance, the Duke declares that the vassals are simply idiots for trying to kill a benefactor with such a reputation. The young man orders the guards to make sure that these brats no longer appear in front of his residence. Looking at the sky, the guy realizes that he is exhausted. He feels as if he has lost everything that he achieved as a man. Suddenly, Theodore freezes and wonders if maybe he had nothing in the first place. With a grin, the Duke thinks that he could not even marry by his own choice. Walking through the garden, the guy unexpectedly stumbles upon Astina sleeping by a tree. Looking closely at his wife, the young man notices that he doesn't look very good. She must be having a nightmare. Theodore recalls that the girl dragged him at night with unprecedented strength, but she looks very fragile. The husband covers Astina with his jacket, thinking that they have a lot to discuss, but apparently their schedules do not coincide. The young man heard from his vassals that his wife trained him, but Oliver said that his monster appearance was close to a wolf. Suddenly, Theodore remembers wool flying around the office, beef jerky on the table and toys. Sitting up sharply, the Duke realizes that the dog he was thinking about is himself. Astina dreams of Theodore, assuring her of his love and that he will be with her all her life. Waking up, the girl jumps up sharply, not understanding where she is. Turning around, the Duchess notices Theodore sitting next to her, frightened by her sudden awakening. The girl looks intently at the young man. She knows that it is not Theodore in front of her, but for some reason she always sees his face on top. Turning away from the Duke, Astina absent-mindedly asks if she is already asleep. The Duke thinks that his wife is truly an unusual person, acting as if nothing happened last night. Realizing that he has not yet formally introduced himself, the young man extends his hand and says that he is Theodore van Talent. The girl shakes hands in return and simply says that her name is Astina. The young man notices that their first meeting was unusual, and he fears that he might have scared the girl last night. Astina replies that if she asks for forgiveness, then she is the one who apologizes for her insolence. Theodore apologizes for his tactlessness and asks how often his wife has nightmares. Remembering last night, the guy decides that Astina might still have a loved one in her hometown. The girl does not intend to continue the topic. She only replies that her dream was a little sad. With a serious face, Astina states that she is now awake, so it is all over. Theodore feels guilty that the girl had to go through something unpleasant, and he doesn't even live up to the role of half-groom. Astina wants to return her jacket to her husband, but he notices that her clothes are too thin and it's quite cold outside. Astina persistently hands her clothes and assures that everything is fine, but her husband is worried about her. Beginning to get angry, the Duchess declares that she does not need the jacket and should be careful that the Duke himself does not catch a cold. Hoping to finally break his wife's stubbornness, Theodore extends his hand to her, noting that they will both walk in the cold. Astina indifferently heads towards the castle, noting that it means so be it. Looking at his wife's back, the Duke wonders whether all ladies in the capital are so temperamental. Heading towards the house, the young man says that he is aware that the vassals attempted to assassinate the Duchess. Theodore says that he heard about this from Oliver and checked all the records for that period. Astina admits that she did not know whether her husband would believe the words of his wife, who appeared only in the morning. The girl reflects that the young man has absolutely no memories of the time when he was a beast. The Duke reports that he was surprised at how well his wife handled matters in his absence, and he should thank her more than once. Looking at her husband, Astina asks if he is angry that she has affected his authority. Theodore replies that the affairs of the vassals showed him that the members of the Adelant family were of a lower level than he thought. The husband continues that he still cannot believe that those whom he trusted would commit such atrocities. Astina gently remarks that people live at the behest of the situation, and if the Duke's mind were intact, this would be impossible. The girl says that we cannot divide everyone into good and evil. A person's character cannot be expressed in one word. Theodore remembers that his wife is younger than him, but it turns out that she says the same thing as Oliver, who is twice her age. Looking at his wife, the Duke wonders what kind of life she has lived. Astina calmly continues that there is no greater stupidity than being confident in a person. Theodore looks at his wife in shock, realizing that she seems to have read his thoughts. The guards tell Oliver that, by order of the Duke, they kicked out all the vassals, but they are not sure that they will surrender so easily. The butler thinks angrily about the unscrupulous fools who undoubtedly deserve punishment. Suddenly, Oliver notices the couple walking and asks in surprise how they ended up together. The Duchess explains that she and Theodore met in the garden. The butler asks in surprise whether the girl has really been in the garden in such an outfit since the morning, and it won't take long for her to catch a cold. Looking at the Duke, Oliver asks if he really didn't offer his jacket to his wife. Astina replies that it's not that cold outside, and Theodore suddenly says that goosebumps are running down the Duchess's arms. The girl asks if this is a joke, to which the husband replies that in that case, she should smile. Smiling, the Duchess says that she needs to go up to her room. The Duke tells Oliver that Astina is truly a special girl and asks if all the town ladies are like that. The butler notes that he can guess why the gentleman thought so and declares that Astina is definitely a special case. Theodore says his wife is exceptional for being able to train the monster. The butler shudders and embarrassedly asks how his lordship knows about everything. The Duke declares that ordinary people do not shake a fishing rod in front of a monster, warns that he will ask again, and hopes for an honest answer. After thinking a little, Theodore asks Oliver if his wife is really human. The butler notes that the gentleman has already passed the period when he would not be able to distinguish reality from fiction. As he leaves, the Duke continues to wonder whether his wife is too exceptional from start to finish. The guy thinks about his calm behavior beyond his age, his manner of speech, and quite often things that he absolutely cannot understand. Oliver notices that such doubts are disrespect for Count Rita, who sent his beloved daughter to them. Listening to the servants' reasoning about marriage, the Duke declares that he has aged quite a bit to say such boring things. Theodore enters his wife's room. Astina politely invites him to have a cup of tea. Looking at his wife, the young man thinks that when he looks at her elegant appearance, his soul becomes calmer. Leaning towards the girl, the Duke says that she is stubborn because the day was definitely cold. Astina suggests sitting down first, otherwise the tea will soon get completely cold. The husband sits down embarrassedly, thinking that he tried to increase his worth, but in the end he got into trouble again. The Duke asks not to consider his question as tactless, but still he would like to know about the details of the girl's appearance in the castle. Astina calmly declares that she was sold for her father's debts. According to the terms of the agreement, for the debts to be written off, she must give birth to an heir to the Duke. The young man is amazed to hear that the Rite family's debt was serious, and they simply had no other choice. After a pause, Theodore asks if the girl would like to return to her family and expresses the hope of receiving an honest answer. Astina reflects that not only is her husband not angry with her management of affairs, but he also regrets the marriage against his will and is thinking about letting her go. The girl understands that in front of her is a noble boy who does not know the world, and honestly answers that she would really like to return. Regrettably, Theodore says he tells Oliver to find a good manager. The young man was hoping for a different answer, but he understands that a girl cannot be forced to live together with a monster who, unknown when, will become human. Astina wonders what will happen to the unfortunate beast if he lets her go. Angry at the display of pity towards him, the Duke angrily asks if she is talking about him. The girl notices that her husband has just regained his sanity and that he cannot take on everything at once. He also learned about the affairs of the estate and considered his wife's request. Theodore remarks with an evil grin that it's not for the wife to talk about this. It's funny in the position of a mouse to worry about a cat. The Duchess laughingly declares that a cat's concern for a mouse is no less ridiculous. The Duke jumps up in anger, thinking that even though he has a huge flaw, his good intentions cannot be ridiculed in such a way. Approaching his wife, the young man asks her not to cross the line. Despite the fact that she is his benefactor, he is not going to accept all her actions. Without hesitation, looking into her husband's eyes, Astina declares that she knew that he would be angry. Theodore states that if he is a monster, then this is not a reason for ridicule, but the Duchess interrupts him and says that he is a man just like her. Astina asks the Duke to be more selfish if he cares about the lives of his subjects. The Duchess mentally urges her husband to say something that is scary to admit. She wants him to selfishly demand what he needs at least once. Theodore clenches his fist tightly, thinking that since he woke up, everything around him seems like some kind of joke. The young man understands that he needs to restrain himself. After all, Astina showed him mercy, but if she leaves, he will not have the strength to stop. Deciding that pride and honor do not matter now, the Duke asks his wife to do him a favor and stay with him. The girl looks at her husband with satisfaction and declares that he is great. Sitting back down on the couch, Theodore notices that Astina is a strange person, truly and unequivocally strange. The young man says that he cannot promise his wife either love for her or any rational relationship. Astina understands that her husband does not have a single chance for a normal life in marriage, but she wants to relieve herself of remorse and is just looking for understanding. Suddenly, the girl declares that the original terms of the contract, which the Adelants demanded, was the birth of an heir. Astina reflects that since the Duke has become a human again, it is much easier to fulfill the condition, and it is better not to waste time. Starting to unbutton her husband's clothes, the girl says that before she didn't know whether he was able to do it, but now there shouldn't be any difficulties. The wife knocks the Duke onto the sofa, and he, in horror and confusion, asks what she is up to. Continuing to remove the young man's clothes, the Duchess declares that he needs an heir. Blushing deeply, Theodore declares that the wife should not worry about the child, which causes confusion in Astina. The guy tucks his shirt into his pants, and his wife says in confusion that if the family does not see an heir, then all the lands will become the property of the Emperor. Theodore understands that if he loses his mind again, his heir will become a protection for the Duchess, so her haste is understandable. The Duke sheepishly explains that for him, this matter requires moral preparation. Astina reflects that, unlike her husband is a young man, and therefore cannot remain calm, so he needs to be guided. The wife touches the Duke, and he begins to tremble and admits that this is his first wedding night. Leaving his wife, the Duke notes that since this is their first wedding night, there is no need to rush into it. Tired of this conversation, Astina calmly notes that, be that as it may, they are spouses. The girl confidently says that since the Duke has returned to human form, they have no reason to hesitate any longer. Theodore thoughtfully asks if the girl would be okay spending her wedding night this way. Astina reflects that this is not the first time for her. Besides, they are not lovers. It is just a connection arising from a contract, so there is nothing important in it. Looking at her husband, the Duchess notices that his behavior looks like childishness, but the Duke reflects that he does not know at what moment to turn into a monster, and he, as the head of the family, doubts that he can decide on this intimacy. Astina states that if the Duke is not ready for this, then there is nothing she can do. At this moment, the young man declares that his wife is saying everything correctly and begins to take off her shirt. Suddenly embarrassed, Theodore asks if the Duchess could turn away. Turning away, the Duchess reflects that in their situation it is ridiculous to talk about haste. The wedding itself was one. Under normal circumstances, the couple would have had time to get to know each other, gently expressing mutual interest. Suddenly, Theodore's face appears before Astina's eyes, who says that he loves her, kissing her hand. In desperation, the Duchess thinks that right before she began the task, she remembered another man. Astina realizes that there has been silence behind her for too long and asks if the Duke is ready yet. The Duchess muses that her husband couldn't have just run away, so she turns around abruptly and asks if everything is okay. Suddenly, Theo jumps on the Duchess and starts licking her, whining with joy. Astina thinks in despair that nothing has passed since the Duke became a man and suddenly turned into a wolf again. The girl tries to understand whether the beast understands her, but having received a paw, she realizes that he has done this before. After telling Oliver the bad news, the Duchess notices that he is not very surprised. The butler says wistfully that as he gets older, he learns to let go more and more. Looking at Theo, the girl hears that when the Duke first became a monster, there was mourning in the house. But over time, everyone realized that tears could not help grief. Astina asks in bewilderment if the servant really expected that the master would return to the form of a beast so quickly. Oliver admits that he kept looking at his watch, and Astina says that the time for which the Duke took on human form was less than she expected. The Duchess wonders whether she should remain confined to this place until the birth of her heir. Oliver says that it is unknown whether there will be a next time, because they did not expect it this time either. The butler is embarrassed, but asks if he can find out what the couple talked about in private. The Duchess says that her husband promised to let her go home if she so wishes. Looking at his mistress, Oliver thoughtfully asks if she will take up this offer. Looking straight into the eyes of her faithful servant, Astina smiles and firmly replies that no, she will not accept this offer. To the butler's surprise, the Duchess reveals that her husband asked her to stay. Astina notes with a grin that it is very funny that the Duke did not threaten, but asked for a wife who was sold to him. In fact, that proposal was a kind of test for the Duke from his wife. If the young man had shown arrogance and despotism, then Astina would have left without hesitation. But the Duke is not such a worthless man as to be so easily forgotten. To sum it up, the girl tells Oliver that even if he doesn't like it, he should continue to stay by her side. The butler replies that he would be honored, but they will have a lot to do because the vassals are buzzing about the Duke's return. Looking at the wolf, Astina remarks that it would be truly wonderful if Theodore was in human form all the time. If everything had been in order, the vassals would not have been able to pounce on the wealth, and Theodore would forever remain a duke who had left the picture. Suddenly, they start banging on the door with loud screams, but Astina calmly allows her to enter. His sighing runs into the room and shouts that he heard that the Duke became human again. Looking at Theo, the Duchess notices that the knight missed the moment. The duration of the magic is very short. Hyzen looks at the wolf in confusion and asks what kind of person the Duke turned out to be. The girl replies that her husband is very handsome, and if he were in his usual appearance, he would probably make more than one lady cry with his beautiful face. Oliver begins to cough, and the knight states that the lady understands that he did not mean appearance. Astina notices that his sighing returned to the estate without even finishing what she asked him to do. The man explains that the lady entrusted him with the construction of a water pipeline. But is it intended specifically for these purposes? The Duchess replies that the knight helped her greatly, and the Duke thanked her for managing affairs during this period. Hyzen hotly declares that the gentleman lost his appearance again too quickly, and he does not understand what kind of curse this is. Astina tells Oliver that she just now remembered that Baron Vernon's father also called the disease a curse, and she wonders what its origin is. The butler replies that he doesn't know exactly why, but one day the disease simply manifested itself, just after the Atalantas began to rule the land. The disease was nicknamed a curse due to its unusual manifestations. Neither a cause nor a cure was ever discovered. Astina understands that all this happened more than 100 years ago, and it may be that the first night greatly angered someone. The head of the family of that period showed himself well in the war that he became a duke, and the soldiers who were killed by his hands are countless. The Duchess reflects that this anger did not spread to her, who started that war. The girl wonders if the reason she got life again is to atone for her old sins. Looking at Oliver and Hee-sing, the Duchess declares that she is very tired and they can go. A maid enters the girls' chambers and asks if the mistress would like to take a bath. Astina replies that this would be very nice. Scented soap will wash away all the fatigue. A few hours later, the Duchess is about to go to bed, but Theo is standing by the bed, whining pitifully. The girl understands that after seeing her husband in human form, she is embarrassed to sleep with him. Deciding that it is still unknown when her husband will become human again, Astina allows the wolf to lie next to her. Looking at the beast, the Duchess laughs and says that when he is human, he is very shy. The girl wishes the wolf good night and affectionately kisses him on the face. At dawn, Astina wakes up abruptly and sees that Theodore has again taken on human form. Somewhat later, the girl tells the Duke about what happened and notices that nothing happened between them. Theodore sheepishly admits that he doesn't remember anything from the moment he took off his clothes. Astina says that after this, her husband suddenly took the form of a beast, which led everyone to great bewilderment. The young man can hardly believe what is happening. In just one day, he turned into a monster and became human again. The Duke asks what time he became human again. His wife replies that it was about 5 in the morning. The guy has a faint hope that tomorrow he too will be able to become a man. The Duke ponders why nothing happened for a year, and suddenly such changes and comes to the conclusion that everything changed after Astina appeared. The husband asks if his wife did something. Maybe something unusual happened. The Duchess understands that everything that happens must be connected with her, but in recent days, everything has been as usual. Suddenly, Astina remembers that both times on the eve of her husband's transformation, she kissed Theo before bed. The girl reports the kiss, which bewilders Theodore, who does not understand how far the Duchess has gone in her attempts. Realizing what her husband was thinking, Astina irritably declares that the kiss was a sign of sympathy for the pet, nothing more. The young man is embarrassed and says that he was simply very surprised, since the answer was very unexpected. The Duchess is still not entirely sure of the true reason, but this was the only thing that united both cases. The curse placed on the Duke is similar to a fairy tale, but it is unlikely that the owner's affection for the pet can be considered as love. Astina reflects that it's difficult to even call all this a kiss. It was just a second touch of lips. The girl looks closely at the Duke and suddenly declares that he is very handsome. Confused, Theodore thinks that his wife's beauty is comparable to other girls, but by her nature, Astina is unique. Most of all, the young man is attracted by the girl's gaze. Once he looks at it, it is no longer easy to forget it. Having heard a compliment from her husband, the Duchess notes that appearance is something that will become flabby and disappear over time. The Duke looks at his wife in amazement, not understanding how a young girl can reason like that. Astina admits that she would like the Duke to get rid of his curse. Hanging his head low, the young man says that he wants this like no one else. Looking out the window, the couple discusses that in the evening they will need to test the connection with the kiss again in order to know for sure. In the kitchen, the maids discuss strange metamorphoses and admit that they did not count on the master's return. One of the girls argues that showing the wife the true appearance of her husband was nothing more than God's providence. Suddenly, a loud scream echoes through the castle, announcing that the master has turned human again. Having met Theodore, Oliver cannot believe that, like the day before yesterday, he has become human again. The butler begins to cry, thanking God that such a miracle could happen again. Oliver says that yesterday the Duchess informed him of her intention to stay because of a request received from her husband. The servant notices that the mistress appears cold, but has a sense of duty and a soul, and she is also infinitely wise. Theodore understands that the butler is right. Any other girl would immediately go home after receiving such an offer. The Duchess is in the library thoughtfully leafing through books, hoping to find at least some information about the curse. The girl puts a stack of books on the table, saying that they are related to curses and perhaps she can get some clue from them. Looking at the books, The Duke asks in surprise whether his wife can read Celtic. Astina calmly replies that she can both read and write, but she can read the ancient language only with a dictionary. The man is surprised to think that he also knows ancient languages, but nowadays even aristocrats only learn a couple of lines. The Duchess notes that the Pilate Academy, where she studied, is a high-level institution. Theriot is ready to bet that there are not 10 people in Pilate who know the Celtic language. The Duke states that even in Phoebe, with its Department of Linguistics, there are not many talented specialists, and even less in Pilate. Astina reflects in surprise that after 100 years the language has been forgotten to such an extent, however, she herself is involved in all this. Too many civilizations have been burned under the auspices of the unification of the continent. Looking at her husband, the girl wonders if she had not burned the storehouse of that wisdom, whether it would have helped lift the curse from the Duke. Astina shakes her head furiously, realizing that there is no point in regrets now. As Theriot is still waiting for an answer, the Duchess reveals that she is simply living as best she can. The husband notices that the girl does not look like a diligent student. Astina notes with a grin that she was not the professor's favorite. Looking at his wife, the Duke comes to the conclusion that she looks more like a teacher than a student. Astina looks up and asks what the young man plans to do after getting rid of the curse. Lost in thought, Theriot hesitantly answers that he will most likely live as before. The wife notices that her husband used to have a rotten and empty life, in which he only worked and performed duties on the allotment. The discouraged Duke admits that his wife is right and asks how she thinks he should live. Astina suggests creating something that her husband enjoys, whether it's a hobby or a pet. Reflecting on the girl's words, the young man raises his head and asks, "How about the man?" Continuing to work with the books, Astina replies that normally this is also not bad. Theriot notes that in her words, the wife seems to be saying that she herself is not an ordinary case. The Duke remembers their first meeting and how his wife called him Theo, and wonders whether the decision will remain the same if he hears the name again. The young man begins to come up with abbreviated names for the girl and asks what she was usually called at home. Astina clearly doesn't like this conversation and replies that she didn't have a pet name because she doesn't like it. Theriot doesn't back down and says with a smile that Tina is a very nice name. The girl looks closely at her husband and realizes that this is not Theodore, no matter how much he resembles him. Having accepted the game, the Duchess replies that she can call her husband Theo if that's what he wants. The Duke notes with enthusiasm that it does not matter to him what his wife calls him. Annoyed, Astina says that all sorts of nicknames are better left for someone more significant. The young man says that if the husband and wife are not significant people, then who can be? Looking at the Duke, Astina notices that his grace is truly a lonely man. Theriot replies that the statement is unexpected because it is the Duchess who seems lonely to him. Looking at his wife, the Duke thinks that she is very erudite. She has a detached manner of speech and behavior, but at the same time, you cannot call her an adult. Astina hands her husband a book and invites him to participate in the search. After all, it is in his own interests. Looking at the book, Theriot reflects that their relationship is not like a marriage, but rather like a business arrangement. As he reads, the Duke asks whether the accusation that the inhabitants of the Lita clan were descendants of witches is not a simple ruse. The girl replies that the nomads of Leth were indeed sorcerers, or rather, they were their descendants. The inhabitants of Alatan were bearers of miraculous power. They could continue their lives even without a developed civilization. Theriot says thoughtfully that, in this case, Martine's blood played a role in her creation of the empire. The Duchess categorically states that the Empress was an ordinary person. At least she definitely did not have any ability for magic. The girl thinks that if she had magic, then instead of personally killing the king, she would simply put a curse on him. The young man learns that the Aleta Plateau was located near a volcano, at the foot of which the magma of rage bubbled, and the Alatam believed that their sacred power originated from there. The Duke asks if the power of the volcano can turn a man into a beast, to which Astina replies that anything can happen. The young man sighs heavily and declares that he will have to spend time finding out more about this. Looking at his watch, Theriot asks his wife to kiss him if this time, when morning comes, he never becomes human. Astina confidently says that perhaps at this point there will be obvious changes, and then they will be able to find some answer. Noticing how her husband's hands are shaking, the girl understands that he is very afraid of turning into a beast again. The Duchess squeezes her husband's hands and offers to bring him hot milk, to which the husband remarks with a laugh that he is not 6 years old. Theodore thinks that for once his wife wanted to show sensitivity, and now she is treating him like a child. The Duchess notes with a grin that 26 years is not yet a mature age. The Duke wearily covers his face with his hands and tells Oliver that his wife is indeed a strange girl. The young man fears that by his reaction to his wife's proposal to spend their wedding night, he has exposed himself as a child in her eyes. The young man realizes that he cannot concentrate on business and stands up abruptly, scaring the butler. Putting on his jacket, the Duke says that he was told that his everyday life was dull and empty. Oliver understands perfectly well who could have uttered such words and notices with alarm that it is already evening. Understanding where the servant was going, Theodore replies that 5 o'clock is still far away. Oliver asks the gentleman to be with the Duchess as much as possible. He should be prepared for unforeseen circumstances. The young man wearily says that it is unlikely that anything will change, even if his wife is with him. The butler clearly disagrees. He states that the difference is very great, so the spouses should under no circumstances separate. Upon learning that her ladyship is in the backyard, the Duke assures that he does not need an escort. Looking around, the young man reflects that if it were not for the strange words of the Duchess, he would now be up to his ears in work. The guy wonders how much time has passed since he went out into the garden of his own free will. Opening the box on the table, Theodore sees the leash and realizes that he lived with it around his neck. Having put the collar on himself, the young man realizes that he wants to know what he was like with Astina in the guise of a beast. The Duchess quickly walks along the path, realizing with alarm that she managed to miss her husband. Approaching the table, the girl sees that Theo is sleeping calmly with a leash around his neck. Mother often told Martina that men are creatures that cannot be thoughtlessly trusted. The woman assured that no matter how attractive they were, the daughter should not mindlessly give herself up to these dummies. A sleepy Martina remarks that she probably doesn't have a father because her mother was simply fooled. The mother pinches the girl's cheek forcefully, saying that she has bad manners towards her mother. Mom assured that the only truth is that all men are either children or males. Looking at the wolf, Astina realizes that it is almost morning, but there are no signs that he will turn again. If suddenly her theory is correct, then even after the birth of an heir, everyone may want the Duchess to continue to remain in the castle. Suddenly, the wolf rushes at his mistress and begins to lick her lips, squealing with joy. A few moments later, Astina opens her eyes and sees that she is resting her hands on the chest of a completely naked Theodore. Removing her hands, the girl calmly notes that they were right, and it was really about the kiss. The Duke throws a blanket over himself and turns away from his wife, embarrassed by the unfolding scene. Having understood why Theodore was embarrassed, the Duchess notes with a smile that he should not be embarrassed, because in a blooming age, this is a natural process. The young man is ready to fall into the ground from embarrassment. He suddenly jumps up and runs away from the chambers. Over breakfast, Astina notices that the effect appeared despite the fact that it was already 7 o'clock in the morning, which suggests that the time period does not matter. The Duchess is considering whether the 12-hour limit is the only one. Her ladyship is sure that they need an experiment to see if there is an effect if someone else does it. Theodore does not hear what his wife is telling him. He only thinks that the feeling of touching her skin remaining on his tongue cannot be forgotten. With a sigh, the Duke thinks that the Duchess doesn't care, of course. It wasn't her, but he was naked. But shouldn't something like that confuse the one who's watching? Looking up at his wife, Theodore thoughtfully asks if Astina has always been so shameless. The girl calmly replies that there is no need to depend so much on something that was inevitable. The young man admits that he felt embarrassed since last time, but it seems that the Duchess is more relaxed. The wife admits that she was a little impatient about the wedding night and regrets it. Astina muses that if the method works without her, and if the curse can be lifted, then she won't have to give birth to an heir. After achieving the goals, marriage will become an anomaly, and the Duke in his full form will be able to find as many worthy partners as he wants. Suddenly, Theodore notices that now the Duchess no longer demands the same things as then. Astina looks at her husband with a smile and asks if he really wants this. The young man is very embarrassed and shouts that this is not what he wanted to say. Laughing, the Duchess explains that her husband is a good person, which is why she can act so carefree. Continuing to examine Theodore, the girl provocatively asks if he considers her indecent. The Duke vehemently begins to object that there can be nothing dishonest in the relationship between the newlyweds. Suddenly, a servant runs into the dining room and reports that the vassals have staged a strike at the castle gates and demand that her ladyship come out to them. The Duke turns around sharply, amazed at the unheard-of audacity, but Astina remains completely calm. The servant says that the vassals do not know that the Duke has become a man again. The Duchess offers to go out to the gate together, but the husband declares that he will go alone because he does not want to cause her even more problems. Passing by her husband, the girl notices that the people are demanding the presence of the Duchess. Leaving the castle, Astina notices that the servants are taking advantage of the master's absence and are behaving violently, so the Duke should go out more often. Theodore responds that they must put their authority above all else in order to prepare for times when they will not be able to take action. Having gone down a few steps, the husband politely offers the girl his hand. Having accepted the hand, the girl notices that her authority as a duchess comes from good relationships. Astina is confident that it doesn't matter whether they have feelings, they need to show a good relationship in public. The Duke thinks that holding his wife's hand, he experiences a feeling of awkwardness and unusualness of the action. Looking at the young man, the Duchess notes his good manners and good appearance. Looking at him, the girl understands why he was so popular in social circles. Astina recalls that among noble ladies, Theodore received the nickname of the Cold Knight. With a laugh, the Duchess realizes that the ladies are unlikely to know that this icy girl is very shy. Seeing the smile on his wife's face, the young man notes that she is obviously in a good mood. The Duchess states that today will be a starting point in many ways, thinking that now they will see what those lower ones have to say in their defense. The nobles at the gate go berserk, shouting that the Duchess is a witch and she did something to the master so as not to lose her authority. Sir Vincent thinks with rage that he has always been loyal to the Duke, so doesn't he deserve to take a small part of the huge fortune? If Astina had not appeared in the castle, his life would not have been in danger because of his debt. Theodore leans over to his wife and says that he never told the vassals that he would forgive them. With disappointment, the young man reflects that since the vassals do not understand the words, he will have to immediately send them to prison. Approaching the gate, the Duke enragedly asks why those who came made such a fuss. The astonished men are at a loss and begin to obsequiously greet their master. The nobles begin to say that they were very worried about the Duke and were afraid that the witch had done something to him. Theodore replies that he is the one who worries about them and notes that the men are not old enough to have vision problems. The young man angrily asks why, in this case, they pretend not to see the Duchess, although they themselves called her. One of the men declares that his lordship actually fell victim to the witch's tricks. Covering herself with a fan, the Duchess reports that the speaker stole the Duke's first portrait, finances, and valuables from the basement. Hearing the accusations, the other man begins calling the girl obscene names and orders her to shut her mouth. Astina says that this man took money from the treasury of a delivery company. Vincent begins to scream, calling on the Duke to listen to them, and all the words of the witch are a blatant lie. The Duchess says that this Sir fabricated business approval in order to ruin the investment fund. Theodore is surprised to realize that his wife remembers all the crimes, and she unconditionally dominates this conversation. The young man threateningly asks if the vassals really thought that he would not be able to distinguish truth from fiction. Addressing the servant, the Duke asks why there are criminals on the castle grounds. The guard replies that the vassals have not yet been brought to justice. Since there are many criminals, it takes time. Vincent understands that now it's all over, and he will die at the hands of the moneylender before he can say anything in his own defense. The man comes to the conclusion that all his problems are solely because of the Duchess. Vincent thinks that to pay off the debt, the girl should have become a servant, but instead she stands arm in arm with the Duke, like an important person. Mad with despair, the man picks up a stone from the ground and throws it forcefully at Astina. Reacting instantly, Theodore draws his sword and covers his wife with himself. Enraged, the Duke orders the attacking vassal to be immediately captured. Astina looks at her husband in surprise, noting that his reaction is much better than she expected. Vincent shouts in despair that he made a mistake only once. He devoted his devotion to the Duke for a long time. The Duke notes that it is not wise to say all this, because only thanks to the Duchess he returned to human form. Theodore states that the vassal is blinded by personal gain and slander against his wife. Looking at the gathered men, the young man says that they have no right to talk about loyalty, thinking only about how to squander his fortune. The girl thanks her husband for his protection and asks if she herself can repay the insult inflicted on her. Theodore looks startled at his wife, who doesn't look surprised and speaks in a calm tone. Taking her husband's sword, Astina approaches Vincent and asks the guard to put away his sword. The Duchess invites the man to play a game in which his life will be at stake. The vassal looks at the lady in surprise, not understanding where she learned about his passion for gambling. Astina invites Vincent to guess whether the Duke's sword is double-edged or sharpened on one side. If the prisoner guesses, she will forgive him for his crime. Theodore ponders that Vincent was a manager and was not interested in fencing. Did his wife really find out this in advance? The vassal reflects with horror that the only weapon he held in his hands was a dagger for self-defense. Deciding that he has no choice and will have to answer one way or another, the man shouts that His Highness's sword is one-sided. Swinging, Astina declares that if they cut in both directions, they will know for sure what kind of sword it is. The Duke closely watches his wife, and at the moment when she swung her sword, the young man bent over as his heart began to beat wildly. Stopping the sword a centimeter from the criminal's neck, Astina says that gambling is the shortest path to ruin. The servant runs up to Theodore, but he assures that everything is fine. His heart is just pounding strangely. The Duke does not understand his strange reaction, because he, as an experienced knight, could not be afraid of the sword. Suddenly, the thought occurs to the young man that it was love that turned his head. The guy has never fallen in love before, but he is sure that if he fell in love with Astina, he would want to continue looking at her. Deciding that he needs to leave as soon as possible and calm down, the Duke declares that they are leaving. 3 days later, Hsing walks down the hallway, happy to finally be freed from his nanny status. The knight sadly reflects that he has suffered a lot due to the fact that everyone initially misunderstood him. Suddenly, a maid catches up with Hsing and asks if he is heading to the Duchess. Having received an affirmative answer, the girl hands the knight a carefully packed sword and asks him to hand it over to the mistress. Reading the inscription on the envelope, the man realizes that the gift is from the Palate Academy, and the sender is Benjamin Leandros. Hsing considers Benjamin a good guy and thinks that he found out about the lady's idleness and decided to send her a sword as a gift. Having pulled the sword out of its sheath, the knight gazes with admiration at the delightful blade. With a wave of his hand, Hsing declares that he will personally give the lady a gift, hoping that she will like the sword. Looking after the departing knight, the girl suddenly remembers that he was not informed that the Duke had become human again. Hsing is happy that everything is going well and decides that this time he must definitely ask for a training session for him. Having knocked on the door and not waiting for an answer, the knight enters the chambers and looks in surprise at the fairy tale handsome man. Hsing asks who is in front of him and where is her ladyship Duchess Astina. Theodore notes that he was the first to ask about who is in front of him and by what right is he interested in Astina's whereabouts. The knight reveals that he is the lady's personal guard, sent by her father, but the Duke declares that this is the first time he has heard of his wife having a guard. When Hsing realized what his interlocutor had said, he stared in amazement at Theodore sitting in front of him. The Duke reasons that it is not surprising that the knight did not recognize him, because before he had only seen a wolf. Shaking the Duke's hand, Hsing reflects that the lady was right. Her husband is truly an unimaginably handsome man. Theodore notices his wife on the training ground. She said that her body is stiff, so she needs to actively train. Suddenly, the Duke notices a sword in the knight's hands. Hsing says that it is a gift sent to the Duchess. Theodore reflects that he still hasn't been able to find the reason why his heart was pounding so hard that day. The Duke watched his wife training, and when he sees Astina swinging a sword, he wants to immediately run away from this place. The young man looks at the cover letter and wonders who Benjamin Leandros is. Hyzen replies that the young man was a friend of the lady from the Palate Academy. The knight understands that Benjamin definitely has feelings for his lady, but since the Duke is human again, he has no chance. Seeing Theodore tense, the man assures him that the young people are just friends. The Duke listens to the man and thinks about why he is so actively making excuses. Having taken the sword and letter, the young man declares that he himself will give the gift to his wife. The guy decides to directly ask his wife if this is the lover she left in the capital. Walking down the corridor, Theodore thinks that if not for his illness, he too would have continued his studies at the Palate Academy. The young man understands that in this case, he could run into Astina in the corridor of the educational institution. Looking at the sword, the Duke understands that his wife is very advanced in fencing and will be happy with such a gift. Remembering the precious sword that hangs in his room, the young man decides that it will be perfect for Astina. Looking at the gift, the young man comes to the conclusion that there is no need for two swords. At the training ground, tired Astina is surprised to notice the Duke arriving. The guy looks at his wife with pleasure and says that a gift has arrived from her friend in the capital. Reading the letter, the Duchess says with a smile that this little thing came from Benjamin. Theodore watches his wife with suspicion and gets the impression that she knew who the gift was from. Examining the blade, Astina says that she sparred with Ben and this guy is trustworthy. The guy's heart begins to pound, and he realizes that the same thing is repeating itself as a few days ago. Does this really confirm that he has feelings for the girl? Noticing the expression on her husband's face, Astina asks if everything is okay, or if something is bothering the young man. Theodore admits that when he looks at the girl with the sword in her hands, his heart beats unusually fast. Astina doesn't understand if her husband's body really remembers the lessons he learned as a wolf. The girl thinks that if she had known that her husband would have bodily memories, she would have treated him more carefully. Theodore suddenly asks if it might be because he likes the Duchess. Astina jumps aside in fear, wondering why her husband suddenly jumped to this topic. The girl looks at her husband, thinking that he is even more naive than she expected, and it seems has never fallen in love with anyone. The Duchess notes that there are relationships in which the time of acquaintance does not matter, but this is not the case. The young man looks at the girl in bewilderment and asks what kind of feeling this is. Astina asks if the Duke has feelings for her. Then shouldn't his heart flutter even in normal times? Theodore gets annoyed and feels as if Astina is leading him to believe that he shouldn't like her. Trying to defend his position, the Duke stubbornly asks why his wife decided that he didn't like her. The Duke asks if the lady really wants to say that she wishes her husband not to have feelings for her. Astina replies that her husband understood everything correctly, and she repeats that he is mistaken. The Duchess leaves, and her husband asks her behind her if the gift from the capital really awakened old feelings in her. The Duke continues that in his opinion, this is why the girl is unpleasant about his approach. Realizing that her husband is simply jealous, Astina states that she did not suspect how immature he was. Theodore notes that when he and his wife first met, she too said a different name. Astina asks how much the young man has heard, and she thinks that even with his scratchy tone, he reminds her of Theodore. Coming closer to the girl, the Duke quotes her words that she still loves. Suddenly, the Duchess swings and throws the gifted sword to the side with all her might. Looking at his wife, Theodore suddenly realizes that as soon as the sword disappeared from his eyes, his heart stopped jumping out of his chest. The girl asks what it's like to be mistaken in one's feelings, and notes that the husband should return to the office and calm down. The Duke understands that Astina showed her feelings to such an extent only twice, and both times were associated with her former man. Digging into the tastes, the Duke realizes with shame that it was he who, out of pathetic stubbornness, said too much and started the whole mess. Having found the sword, the young man decides that he must immediately return it and apologize. But at the same time, he notices that he is experiencing some kind of annoying feeling. In the tavern, ordinary people are discussing that the Duchess has dispersed all the bribe-taking bastards, and now people can breathe a sigh of relief. Remembering the story with the maid, The men note that her ladyship is a fair and merciful person, and with her arrival life returns to the allotment. Suddenly, a boy approaches one of the men and asks him to repeat what he just said. The next morning, the Duke looks longingly at the empty pillow and realizes that Astina has already left. Previously, by the time she woke up, the girl was just getting ready to leave and wished him good morning. Throwing the blanket aside, Theodore decides that he should go and apologize right now. Having found his wife, the young man wishes her good morning and admits that he was looking for her to apologize. Theodore admits that he is sorry that he behaved restlessly, did not take into account his wife's feelings, and considered only his own as a priority. Handing the sword to the Duchess, the husband notes that even if she does not accept it, there will be no strange misunderstandings. Accepting the sword, Astina asks for forgiveness if her actions caused his lordship concern. Theodore understands that everything seems to be said, but he continues to feel uncomfortable. Suddenly, the Duke asks his wife if she is thinking about leaving the duchy. Astina replies that if his lordship's illness passes, then she will have no reason to stay here, and the Duke will be able to find as many deputies as he wants. Confused and upset, Theodore asks why, in this case, the girl did not tell about this earlier. The Duchess replies that she was going to give birth to an heir and return home, but if after this the Duke plans to enter into another marriage, then this child could become a hindrance. Frustrated, Theodore thinks that of course he thought about letting the girl go home, but he counted on the fact that she wouldn't want it. Suddenly, the couple hear a strange voice calling out to their brother. Leaning against the wall, Arthur states that he did not think about his brother becoming a husband in his absence. A little later, the brothers are sitting in the living room, and Arthur asks in bewilderment what happened. Theodore notes that he can ask the same thing. His brother wonders if this is all that the Duke can say after a 2-year separation. To Arthur's fury, the young man notices that the runaway boy is still sharp-tongued, and he does not know how to look into the eyes of the aunt who sent his son to their family. The younger brother begins to explain that he did not run away, but went on an adventure to become stronger in every way. The boy admits that 6 months ago he came to Atalanta, but was unable to meet the Duke. Arthur says that upon arrival, he saw the monster that was sitting inside his brother and left again. The boy was in the south of the continent for a long time, where rumors did not reach, but the closer he came to the plot, the more often he heard about the curse. With his hands to his cheeks, Arthur shouts that it was then that he realized that the asshole's family was finally in trouble. With a grin, Theodore notes that the younger brother was still worried. Arthur remarks that while he is so caring on the outside, the Duke is incredibly strict on the inside, but his brother replies that he is just being objective. With resentment, the boy says that he still remembers how his brother made him run 100 laps around the parade ground when he suspected that he was shirking his training. Sighing, Theodore notices that his brother has not changed at all in his behavior. The Duke says that the rumors are true, and he really became a man thanks to his wife's kiss. Arthur doesn't understand what this nonsense is, because even the richest of Atalanta couldn't cope with the curse. And then there's some kind of kiss. Ordinary people don't know that the Duke's illness was inherited, so they talk about how the curse was lifted by love, just like in a fairy tale. Arthur declares that he does not believe stupid stories. The woman must have taken advantage of the moment. Theodore interrupts his brother and declares that the Duchess is not a suspicious person at all. The boy passionately declares that women who infiltrate the family cannot help but be suspicious. The Duke angrily remarks that Arthur's statement insults all previous duchesses. The boy states that the weddings were fake, so the only villains were the dukes themselves. Having calmed down, Arthur says that Astina is the only one who agreed to get married, not knowing that there is a den of monsters here. Suddenly, the young people are interrupted by Oliver, who declares that Mr. Arthur is rude to the Duchess. The butler passionately says that Lady Astina is a blessing to the Atalanta family. With a grin, Theodore notes that since his wife managed to appease Oliver himself, this could mean one of 2 things. The young man continues that either his wife is real, or she is the worst fake. The older brother notices that during the time that they have not seen each other, Arthur's manners have noticeably deteriorated. Arthur warily asks if his brother wants to make him run around the parade ground again. Oliver listens with surprise that the Duke has come up with an intellectual punishment, namely, to bring a certain book and rewrite it. The boy jumps to his feet and shouts that he is not going to do anything because he does not feel wrong. Running out of the room, the boy shouts that he will soon be 19, and he does not intend to listen to his brother's grumbling. Oliver leans over to the gentleman and asks if they have such a book. The Duke replies that he has no idea. Theodore says that if Arthur does not find the book he needs by nightfall, then the butler should find something similar and give it to him. Suddenly, the Duke shudders, amazed at the thought that Arthur and Astina are the same age. Arthur irritably notices that he can't find the damn book anywhere, that his brother specially stuffed somewhere. Oliver hands the younger gentleman a book and says he can rewrite it. The butler responds to the boy's concerns that this book will be just right. Arthur stares at the servant and notices that he is definitely hiding something. The boy swoops down on Oliver and orders him to confess immediately. Arthur comes to the conclusion that his brother is mocking him and, shouting that he won't get away with it, runs out of the library. With a book in his hand, the boy runs down the corridor, loudly calling for Theodore. Arthur runs into the couple's chambers. Astina turns sharply and asks where the boy has his manners. The boy is embarrassed at first, and then brazenly declares that he completely forgot that his brother got married. Astina recalls that the Duke told her that his brother was very ill-mannered, and he would introduce them another time. The girl says that she is the second daughter of Count Rite, Aston van Attelant, and asks if she can call the boy Sir Arthur. The younger brother declares that he is not yet a knight, and besides, the girl does not need to know his name. Arthur remembers that the Duchess is also 19 years old and asks how she managed to screw such a mug as his brother. The boy declares that he does not buy empty words, and if Astina has something in mind, then it would be better for her to lay it all out at once. The Duchess wonders whether Arthur really sees her as an opportunist. The girl walks towards the bed and notices that it is already late, and if the young man wants to talk, he better come tomorrow. Arthur begins to shout that in the absence of Aston's brother, he is not even going to deny anything. Turning sharply, the Duchess calls on the boy to observe proper etiquette when addressing her, the Duke's wife. As she gets into bed, the Duchess remarks that if Arthur has nothing to say, he should return to his room. Looking at the sleeping Theo, the girl thinks that it would be mean enough to leave the annoying idiot to her while he sleeps peacefully. Arthur shouts indignantly that he is Theod's cousin, and is Astina really going to go to bed and leave him standing like this? The Duchess asks with a grin whether the boy will be satisfied if she treats him like an animal. Arthur abruptly throws the blanket off the girl and asks who she takes people for. Astina sits up on the bed, tiredly thinking about the fact that Arthur reacts to everything just as hot-tempered as his brother. The Duchess offers to continue the conversation in the presence of the Duke, but Arthur angrily asks where she is taking his brother. The girl turns to the dog, and the boy asks in surprise what kind of dog is lying on the bed. Suddenly, it dawns on Arthur that the curse has not been lifted, and that in front of him is none other than Theodore himself. The stunned boy shouts that the witch turned his brother into a dog and is going to cook him into a stew and eat him. Astina looks at Arthur in surprise and thinks that he has a very rich imagination. The girl notices that the boy has opened her, and since he has come, she should change the order. The Duchess remarks that she needs to wag her tongue less, and Arthur fearfully asks her not to approach. The boy is so frightened that he quickly runs out of the room, and the Duchess wearily thinks that she can finally sleep. Saying goodbye to Theo, Astina says that he needs to sit quietly in the room. The couple plan to test whether the mechanism will change at night, since the Duke remained human for more than 12 hours. Social events are held in the evenings, and it would be nice if they could regulate the opening hours. Arthur loudly calls out to the girl, and with a sigh, she thinks that the nuisance has come again. The boy bursts into the office and furiously shouts that the Duchess has duped him. Astina does not react. Then Arthur runs up to her, grabs her hand, and asks where his brother is. Trying to control herself, the Duchess calmly asks the boy to let her go. Approaching the girl, Arthur impudently asks where are her good manners and the word please. Remaining unperturbed, the girl once again asks Mr. Esteban to let her go. Arthur grins and declares that the Duchess deceived him yesterday, and now will not go unpunished. With one sharp jerk, Astina jumps out of her chair, throws the boy onto the table, and puts a dagger to his throat. Leaning over, The girl notices that the boy should have asked how, without being a witch, she was able to survive with the monster. Arthur is visibly frightened, and the Duchess says she warned him several times and asked him to use his manners. Astina grabs the boy's tongue and reasons that he will become more modest if he cuts it off. The Duchess mockingly wonders whether her husband will forgive her for cutting out his cousin's tongue or punishing her. Realizing that the girl's eyes do not lie, Arthur tries to say that he was wrong. After catching his breath, Arthur asks what it was just now, to which Astina replies that she showed mercy to the spoiled lamb. The boy asks if the Duchess is a hired killer who plans to kill his brother and take over the dukedom. The Duchess sighs and remarks that they should have cut out the boy's tongue after all, because he made too much noise. Extending her fingers, the girl says that she is not a murderer, not a witch, and is not going to eat her husband. Astina says that she made an agreement according to which she will leave Atalanta after she lifts the curse. Arthur intends to ask his brother about his wife's power. If she is not a witch, then where does she get so much power from? Having calmed down, Arthur says that he only has one question left. With delight, the boy asks how the girl was able to kill him. Is she really that good with a sword? And will she teach him too? Hyzen has difficulty warming up his body. He only asked for training, but has become a rival on whom they take out their anger. The knight wonders why the lady was out of sorts yesterday, and whether there was a quarrel over a gifted sword. The man remembers that Astina was going to get a divorce in a year, but who knows what is happening with her and the Duke now? Hyzen enters the office, where at this time Arthur begs the girl to train him. Turning sharply, the boy boldly looks at the knight and asks who he is. Astina comes up with a great idea and asks if Arthur is really interested in fencing. Hyzen is amazed to hear Astina declare that from now on this child is his student. Approaching the knight, the girl reports that the boy is 19 years old. He is the Duke's cousin, and his name is Arthur Esteban. At the same time, Theo sleeps restlessly in his chambers, tossing and whining in his sleep. The Duke dreams of how he, as a boy, once found a secret passage. The dungeon seemed strange. For a forgotten place, it was neatly maintained and lit from the inside with torches. Having reached the end of the turn, Theodore is horrified to see a monster sitting behind bars. Opening his eyes, the Duke sees Astina in front of him, who reports that everything worked out, and now her husband can be a man in the evening. Suddenly, the young man, still asleep, squeezes his wife tightly in his arms and presses himself against her shoulder. The girl offers to bring water, but her husband refuses and embarrassedly says that he showed her his ugly side. Astina calmly notes that it was not ugly, only the spheres are different, but every person is weak in some way. Theodore reflects that Astina is inscrutable, makes it known that one day she will leave, and at the same time is affectionate at the most necessary moment. But every time the husband, deceived by courtesy, tries to cross the line, the girl cruelly pushes him away. The Duke understands that his wife will never understand his fear and asks what her weakness is. Staring intently at the Duke, Astina replies that he does not need to know about her weaknesses. Theodore passionately says that this is not fair, because the girl has seen his most disgusting sides. The Duke remarks that since they are husband and wife, it would be fair for him to know about her shortcomings. After thinking, Astina reports that she is stupid and is still far from having any personal feelings. The Duke remarks that he does not know anyone more sympathetic than his wife, but the girl replies that this is only for those who mean nothing to her. Looking at the Duchess's back, the young man thoughtfully says that if he observed her composure, then he means absolutely nothing to her. Turning around, Astina notices that the Duke is crossing the line again. The young man understood the reason why they were still distant from each other. He wanted to get to know his wife, but she was not at all interested in him. Looking at his wife, Theodore thinks that she has come closer to him than anyone else, but she easily says that she will leave him. Suddenly, the Duke asks if Astina will be able to cry because of his death. The Duchess notices that her husband is talking about strange things. It is obvious that she will be sad. Oliver remembers yesterday morning when he was woken up by Arthur and is glad that everything is calm today. The butler thinks with a smile what ridiculous thoughts came into the boy's head and hopes that he apologized to his mistress. Entering the office, the servant is amazed to notice the gentleman sitting at the table at such an early hour. Theriot calmly tells the butler that he came to the office at midnight. Oliver happily notes that this means that the master can take human form at night. Noticing the young man's distant appearance, Oliver wonders why he is in such a bad mood. Looking thoughtfully out the window, Theriot asks the servant if Astina really hates him for being a monster. When Oliver asks if the couple quarreled, the Duke replies that it is not a quarrel, but that he missed an important detail. The young man says that the Duchess cannot love a husband who spends half the day in the form of an animal. The butler says that when the master was a wolf, the girl was afraid that he would be lonely, so she was constantly near him. Theriot cannot understand why his wife wants to leave him, because after a divorce, rumors will certainly spread in society. The young man understands that he continues to do what is beneficial to him and does not understand what has happened to him with his selfish nature. Noticing Astina on the parade ground, Arthur is glad that she came and asks where they will start training. Hyzen notes that since Arthur is now also his student, it would be logical for everyone to train together. With a laugh, the Duchess notes that in this way, the knight decided to take revenge on her, but the man replies that he wanted to show his student to the teacher. The boy runs up to the girl and asks in bewilderment if she really taught Hyzen. Pointing her finger at Arthur's forehead, Astina says that he still continues to be disrespectful. Hyzen laughs at the situation and tells Arthur that his mistress taught him when he was 10 years old. The boy notices that he is glad to study with the knight, but apparently he cannot catch up with the genius. The girl watches the boy and realizes that he has a clear feeling of inferiority. Astina lost to Owen every time, and there were times when she wanted to win so much that she sharpened her grudge against her mother. Approaching Arthur, the Duchess declares that his achievements should not be discounted because she perfectly achieved her goal. The mother taught her daughter that the only person a girl must defeat will always be herself. Astina instructs Arthur that he should be more proud of his success anyway. Deciding to teach her students a lesson, the girl gives them 30 laps around the parade ground as a warm-up. Standing aside, Astina reflects that after the disagreement, she never saw her husband. The couple recently began to communicate as person to person, and the girl did not expect her husband to show emotions for such a stupid reason. The Duchess recalls the look of the young man, who expressed a passionate desire to attract attention. Astina tries to understand why she is so worried about this, because in a year, each of them will go their own way. The Duchess finds her husband in the garden, but does not dare to speak. The young man calmly remarks that if she has something to say, then let him say it. The girl replies that she made the Duke sleep late, so she decided to just leave him. Theriot says with interest that yesterday, when he was leaving, his wife did not stop him, but now she came and showed concern. Astina admits that at night she hoped that his lordship would return. Rising from the hammock, Theriot asks in surprise whether the girl was really waiting for him. The young man turns away, and Astina irritably says that she does not understand why the Duke's mood is so spoiled. Theriot cannot understand how such an enlightened girl cannot notice his loneliness. Turning sharply, the Duke declares that for Astina, the dog is better than himself in human form. The young man declares that he and the wolf are one and the same, so why does his wife treat them so differently? As he leaves, the Duke tries to calm his anger, reasoning that there is nothing wrong with his wife being indifferent to him. A few days later, during dinner, Arthur wonders if Astina and Theriot had a falling out. The boy notices that it is somewhat strange to have lunch with his brother and dinner with his wife, and asks why the spouses do not come at the same time. The girl replies that she is busy training, and evening is an inconvenient time for the Duke to move around. Arthur shouts in despair that these are all excuses. How could it be that in just a few days 3 people never met? Astina wearily replies that if the boy is so interested, then he can ask his brother about it, since she herself does not know why he behaves this way. The boy smiles smugly and says that he was right and the couple quarreled after all. Astina denies this fact, to which Arthur notes that in this case the girl should go to her brother herself and try to fix everything. The boy notices that at lunch his brother did not touch the food, and if he dies of hunger, then the responsibility will lie with Astin. The girl talks about the Duke's strange question and what he said. The boy, in shock, asks what Astina answered. She replies that of course she said that she would be very upset. Arthur is indignant at the girl's expression and states that she made her brother human, so she has already become special to him. Early in the morning, Astina looks at Theo sleeping and remembers Arthur's words that she has become special to the Duke. The boy said that Adelant boys were kept in a room until they were 5 years old and could not move freely around the house. What will be the state of mind of a person who was cut off from the world, unable to go outside until adulthood? Among other things, the parents refused to become attached to their son, fearing that he would die. The girl understands that Arthur ended up with deeper feelings, and in order to deal with his brother's illness, he wandered around all the provinces for 6 months. Looking at the wolf, Astina realizes that her husband is truly an unbearably lonely person. As soon as the Duke became human again, he immediately got down to business, although in fact he was desperate for affection from someone. Kissing the wolf, the girl sadly wonders why her husband received the key to salvation. Opening his eyes, Theriot notices with bewilderment that Astina is sitting on him and looking closely at him. Instantly embarrassed, the young man asks what the girl is up to. Pressing her husband's shoulders to the bed, Astina declares that this way he will not be able to escape from her. Resigned, Theriot declares that everything happened because Astina does not think about him at all. Looking at his wife, the Duke asks if she has always been indifferent to him. Removing her hands, Astina notices in surprise that she treats this way not only towards her husband. Scratching his forehead, Theriot notes with a grin that the girl admitted it after all. The Duke says that it is unbearable to feel that he survived thanks to someone else's mercy, but nevertheless, without the girl, he will die. The Duchess clarifies that he will not die, but only lose his mind. Interlocking his fingers, Theriot replies that if he can't be himself, it will be worse than death. The guy tells how once in childhood he met the same monster. Perhaps the wolf was his father's brother, or someone else who was Atalant's successor. Sitting up on the bed, Theriot asks if the girl understands why he asked to be locked in the bedroom. The young man says that he did not want to leave the bedroom. He was afraid that everything would end sadly, and he would kill someone. The Duke admits that no matter how pitiful it may sound, he is afraid of death, which is why he needs Astina. The husband says that he is even ready to close his eyes to the fact that his wife feels nothing but compassion for him. At that moment, the young man saw a wounded monster reflected in the girl's eyes. Covering his wife's eyes with his hand, the Duke realizes that the fact that he was begging another man to save his life looked even more disgusting than the monster. Astina, feeling her husband's incredible pain, quietly asks to forgive her. Squeezing the Duke's hand, the girl says that although she cannot understand his feelings, she knows why he thinks so. The poor young man, who grew up without the opportunity to receive love, is now so fixated on his new family. The girl says that for the first time in a long time, someone else was next to her, and she forgot that being with each other is a really warm feeling. The Duchess reports that even if she leaves her husband after she gets rid of the curse, their connection will not disappear anywhere. Astina invites His Excellency to call her, his close friend, every time he feels lonely. In despair, Theriot realizes that his wife's care is so warm that he has no way to get out of here. A few days later, the servants prepare the carriage, discussing that the couple are going on an official inspection of their property. Extending his hand to his wife, Theriot notes that she looks absolutely beautiful. Looking at his meager wardrobe, the young man notices that he needs to sew several new dresses for his wife. Astina nods in agreement, noting that if they attend formal events, she will need new outfits. The Duke looks at his wife with delight. He did not expect that she would so easily agree to his proposal. The guy begins to make plans that he will need to use precious stones and handmade lace for sewing. With a grin, the girl notices that His Excellency is too caring today. Astina thanks her husband for the offer, but still there is no need to take such care of her. Leaning towards his wife, Theriot passionately declares that they are close friends. The girl understands with skepticism that the Duke was greatly affected by her words. The Duchess states that friends don't have to bribe each other, so you shouldn't overdo it with caring. Holding his wife's hand, the young man realizes that because of the gloves, he does not feel the calluses from the sword on his palm. Suddenly, the Duke stops and notices that his wife's trousers suit her better than her dresses. Astina laughs back and warns that no ordinary lady would take that as a compliment. Sitting in the carriage, Theodore is very worried and says that the opportunity to appear among many people again gives a lot to think about. Astina says reassuringly that her husband was simply created for the stage, and he is very famous in aristocratic society. The young man admits with a grin that it was very difficult to get as close as possible to the very top of the capital's nobility. The Duchess says that she heard talk about one most beautiful duke who melted the hearts of many women. Suddenly, a girl jumps out in front of the horses, pulling the carriage, and asks the gracious Duchess to listen to her. Hyzen shouts that the lady is too careless because the girl could turn out to be a dangerous person. Astina wearily repeats to the knight that because of his grumbling, he will die an old bachelor. The knight continues to grumble. The Duchess turns sharply and says that he really got her. In the reception hall, the girl bows before the Duchess, and she asks whether the stranger realized what she had done. The girl sincerely asks for forgiveness from the lady, but declares that she had no other way to meet the Duchess. Suddenly, Hyzen recognizes the girl and declares that she is the same maid from the tavern. The girl examines the knight and suddenly recognizes him with joy. Astina is somewhat surprised that Hyzen knows their captive. Suddenly, the girl begins to cry and begs her ladyship and the Lord Knight to help her. After a while, the Duchess clarifies that the girl came to them with the goal of taking revenge on the bandits with whom she was in league. Jessie says that since childhood she grew up among boys and always took part in group fights. Everything was fine until the girl beat the brats who came to the hotel in a crowd. The robbers turned out to be close friends of the manager of those lands, and they began to threaten that they would burn down their hotel. Hyzen listens in bewilderment that the owner of the land is covering for robbers, completely forgetting what honor means. After listening carefully to Jessie, the Duchess calmly asks if she is finished. Astina notes that she is the Duchess of Atalanta and has no rights to influence what is happening in the lands of Bellois. The Duchess asks if the girl really expected that a quarrel with the owner of other lands would start because of her. Jessie is disappointed and thinks that this was her last hope, and she was stupid for coming here. The mother assured her daughter that sooner or later the persecution would end. She just needed to wait out the turbulent time. Suddenly, Jessie hears that it is unwise to start a quarrel for the sake of a simple girl, but everything would be different if she were the lady's knight. Astina extends her hand and tells Hyzen to give him the sword in order to conduct the exam. The Duchess states that if Jessie can put the knight in a difficult position, then she will think about her request. The girl desperately understands that a fight with a battle-hardened knight is the same as an order to die. Realizing that she has nowhere to retreat, Jessie decides that she has to try, no matter what will come of it all. Hyzen was sure that the girl would drop her sword, but she did a good job, although she was too naive. With one powerful throw, the knight easily knocks the sword out of Jessie's hands. Falling to her knees, the girl realizes that everything is lost, and now she will be punished for jumping out in front of the carriage. Astina thoughtfully says that Jessie is quite strong and evaluates objects well. The girl kneels in front of the mistress, and she asks if Jessie wants to help her mistress. The girl cannot believe that she has such a chance, because she is not a man and does not belong to the nobility. Jumping to her feet, the girl enthusiastically thanks the lady for this opportunity and assures that she will do everything for the training. Approaching Jessie, Astina says that she has hopes for her, so the girl should try hard. The mistress declares that since the girl has become her person, she cannot sit idly by. She must pay for the humiliation of her servant. Hyzen accompanies Jessie to the barracks and explains that she will now live here. The knight holds out the lock and tells the girl to lock the door before going to bed. The man notices that the girl liked the room, and she, who had previously been looking out the window, sharply turns to him. During their first meeting, Hyzen was dead drunk, but now the girl notices that he seems very masculine. Arthur comes into the room and complains that he almost died under the scorching sun while waiting for the teacher. Noticing Jessie, the boy laughs and asks if she is Mr. Hyzen's girlfriend. The knight blushes and tells Arthur to say hello to Jessie, who will now train with him. The boy asks in bewilderment how some girl can become a knight's apprentice. Hyzen gives Arthur a powerful slap on the head, noting that he has forgotten his manners again. The boy continues to refuse to greet the girl, for which the teacher grabs his ear. Theriot wakes up at dawn and notices that Astina is getting ready to leave somewhere. The young man does not understand where the dressed duchess was going at such an early hour. Having caught up with the girl in the corridor, the Duke asks where she was going, and in such a suspicious outfit. The Duchess calmly replies that she needs to do something, but without anyone noticing. Astina asks her husband not to worry. She is not going to stay long. Theriot is surprised that his wife does not take security with her, but the girl assures that this is not necessary. The young man notices that the problem is in the personality of the Duchess herself, and since she doesn't want any prying eyes, he will go with her. Walking around the city, Astina notices how much admiration the Duke's appearance evokes among passing girls. As she pulls up Theriot's hood, the Duchess asks him to smile less attractively because he stands out too much. The young man laughs and notes that he is becoming more and more interested in their destination. Approaching a clothing store, Theriot wonders if all the mystery is about buying dresses. The owner of the shop joyfully greets visitors, assuring that in her store they will find everything their heart desires. The Duke examines 2 bright dresses, not understanding what his sophisticated wife wants to buy in such a strange place. Astina puts on outfits and asks her husband, calling him Theo, which one suits her best. Accepting the game, Theriot notices that his left dress suits Tina better. After some time, the Duchess hands her husband a mountain of boxes, saying that she has already bought everything. Returning to the castle, the Duke says that the clothes he bought are similar to those bought by a recently rich man. Astina notes with a smile that her husband is very insightful, and this helps her a lot. Remembering Jessie, the Duke asks if it's not because of her that his wife behaves this way. Theriot notes that the fact that the Duchess accepted her into her knightly detachment is already considered a great virtue. Astina states that Jessie has a predisposition. She is not trained in technology, but she can surpass the Duchess herself in physical strength. Suddenly, the girl sadly says that with such talent, it would probably be better not to know about it. Putting aside her sadness, the Duchess says that it is still a pity to miss such a gift, just like this expensive but completely incomprehensible clothing. With irony, Astina notes that the store owner, with her taste in clothes, should clearly take up another craft. Theriot laughs and is relieved to note that his wife didn't really like the dresses. The Duchess is surprised to hear that Jessie should succeed because her mistress is an excellent swordswoman. Remembering how desperately his heart beats at the sight of his wife with a sword in her hands, Theriot declares that he watches her with a fluttering heart. Astina is embarrassed and comes to the conclusion that the time has come to gradually start telling her husband the truth. Choosing expressions, the Duchess begins to say that when her husband takes the form of a wolf, he sometimes lacks training. Noticing his wife's embarrassment, the Duke wonders what she is trying to tell him. Stopping abruptly, Astina boldly admits that she once struck His Highness with a sword. The Duchess begins to justify herself that at that moment her husband was not formally her husband, and he was unable to control himself. Theriot understands that all his strange reaction to the sword in the hands of his wife was just a consequence of frightening training. A moment later, to the Duchess's surprise and relief, the young man begins to laugh loudly. Having calmed down, the Duke notes that he is very grateful to his wife because thanks to her control, he does not tear people apart. Theriot thanks the girl, and she embarrassedly remarks that this is not something that deserves gratitude. After a while, Astina tells Hyacin that he will have to go with her to the lands of Bellois as a personal guard. The knight understands that the lady is going there because of Jessie, but he cannot understand what Astina is going to do there. The Duchess says with a grin that the steward of those lands who has eaten his fill should be taught a lesson. Hyacin notices that the lady is saying dangerous things, and besides, she has never had to kill anyone. The girl reflects that the knight is right. She hasn't had to kill anyone since she was reborn as Astina. With a grin, the Duchess informs the servant that she is, in fact, an incredible killer. Hyacin notes that he had to kill about 10,000 people and wonders how much the girl has in her account. Hearing the figure of 100,000, the knight laughs, noting that the Duchess does not want to lose in anything. Suddenly, Astina and Hyacin hear loud screams. Arthur and Jessie are quarreling on the parade ground. Astina is interested in what is happening between the youth. to which the knight notes that they get along very poorly. Jessie doesn't understand what she did to Arthur, and if she leaves the training, the blame will fall on the young master. The Duchess approaches the young people and notices that they seem to be trying very hard. Embarrassed, Jessie says that thanks to her ladyship's care, everything is going well. Looking at Arthur, Astina notices that he is not helping the girl at all, but Jessie assures that this is not so. The Duchess tells the girl that she believes that she can overcome all difficulties. Ignoring Arthur, Astina tells Jessie that although he has a bad temper, he is still good with a sword. The Duchess tells Arthur that if he cannot calm down his arrogance, then he should remember by whose grace his tongue is in place. Turning to the boy, the Duchess asks why he is dissatisfied, to which Arthur replies that everything is in perfect order. In this case, her ladyship declares, she really hopes that the gentlemen will show her their incredible development. Leading Hyzen away, Astina says that before being sent to Bellois, he must undergo special training. Looking at Jessie, Arthur remarks with contempt that she should be pleased that the Duchess is taking her side. The girl says that the lady is her savior, and she will always be grateful to her. Jessie says that since she is disturbing the master so much, she will gladly step aside and continue her training. Arthur angrily says that the very fact that the girl came here as a junior student is a shame for him. Turning sharply, Jessie replies that she will never leave here, even if the master considers her an eyesore. The boy says that he does everything for Jessie's sake, since she does not understand what it is like for a rootless girl to become a knight. Approaching the girl closely, Arthur asks if she knows that during the exams, she will have to live in the same tent with men for 2 weeks. Although Jessie is strong, she will never be able to withstand a trained man. Jessie notices in confusion that there are also female knights. Take the Duchess, for example. Arthur notes with a sigh that all the female knights came from noble families, and her ladyship is not eager to become a knight, unlike Jessie. The boy thinks that now the girl must understand her situation and run away in tears. Jessie looks at her interlocutor with rage, thinking that in front of her is an idiot who was lucky enough to be born an aristocrat. The girl will never give up because the Duchess herself believed in her, and Sir Hyzen accepted her as a student. Jessie is furious and says that if the young master only says nasty things, then everyone will hate him. The girl adds that the boy strives with all his might to hurt others, while he himself is afraid of even one word from his mistress. As she leaves, Jessie says that Arthur hates her, but she herself is not inferior to him in reciprocity. A few days later, Theodore sees his wife off and says that she must return safely. The Duke notices that Astina is riding in the clothes that she bought in the city, and Sir Hyzen is very saddened by his appearance. The girl says that the journey there and back will take about 3 days, but she would like to ask her husband something. Astina says that Theodore should follow her tomorrow morning, to which her husband remarks that then he will need a kiss. Without delay, the girl stands on tiptoe and kisses her husband on the lips. Jessie and Arthur are watching the scene, and the boy starts screaming that people are actually looking at them. Hyzen grabs Arthur and declares that it is high time for him to get into the carriage. Pulling away, the Duchess explains that she kissed her husband in advance so that tomorrow he would turn into a man. After numerous attempts, the couple found out that only the 12-hour limit in human appearance was important. The young man is very embarrassed, because before his wife only kissed him when he was a wolf. The Duchess heads to the carriage and remarks in parting that she and her husband will see each other tomorrow. There was an old tale about a warrior who had to marry an ugly girl because of a royal order. The girl admitted that she was actually a witch and became so after her sisters cursed her. The groom assured the bride that everything was fine now, and since they were getting married, he would be able to protect her. After the wedding, the curse was partially dispelled, and as night fell, the bride turned into a beautiful girl. The wife explained that she could be beautiful either during the day or at night, and asked when her husband wanted to see her beautiful. The warrior said that he would choose the night, and then only he would be able to admire the beauty of his wife. The girl said that she wanted to choose a day, and then everyone would see her beauty. The husband agreed with his wife, and after that the curse was completely dispelled. Astina asks Theodore with interest when he would like to be human, day or night. The Duke looks at his wife in bewilderment and replies that most likely during the day, because he has to fulfill his duties. Astina notes that she would choose the night, because then only she will be able to admire her handsome husband. Theodore is so amazed that he doesn't even find the right words to answer. Realizing that fairy tales are unlikely to help lift the curse, the girl advises her husband not to take it into his head and heads to the carriage. Theodore looks thoughtfully after the carriage and realizes that his wife is really capable of confusing people. On the outskirts of the Bellois forest, the robbers lament that nothing has been happening in the area lately. Hearing the noise and seeing the approaching carriage, the bandits jump up, hoping for prey. Having fallen into a trap, Heisen helps the coachman and shouts to the lady not to go out. The robbers appear, point a sword at the knight, and order him to get everything they have. Astina comes out of the carriage in a provocative outfit and a large hat, and wonders what all the fuss was about. The leader of the panda comes to the conclusion that this is clearly a newly rich young lady in front of him, and they have finally caught what they need. The Duchess demands not to touch her because she is the eldest daughter of a famous merchant, and no one can get away with harm caused to her. Suddenly, the leader takes a closer look at Jessie, who is sitting with her head bowed low. Her face seems familiar to him. The rest of the bandits run up to the leader, and one of them recognizes the girl as the one who beat them in the hotel. The leader grabs Jessie by the clothes and, grimacing with anger, rejoices that they have finally met. Astina starts screaming loudly for the bandit to take his dirty hands off her maid. The man roughly grabs the girl by the face and declares that they have a lot of questions for her. The Duchess runs up and forcefully pushes the robber, who was not expecting an attack. Recovering from surprise, the man pulls out a dagger and begins to threaten Astina. The Duchess does not allow the robber to finish. She rushes at him in an attack and deliberately puts her hand under the dagger. Having made sure that the wound turned out as it should, the girl calmly tells Heisen to beat him. Without hesitating for a second, the knight deals a powerful blow to the bandit holding him. The knight and Arthur, who ran to his aid, dashingly deal with the bandits who attacked them. Jessie does not stand aside, and the leader is surprised to realize that this is not an ordinary maid in front of them. Looking at Astina, the man understands that they have fallen into some kind of trap organized by this particular girl. The robber intends to get rid of the Duchess, but she strikes him first. At Bellois Castle, Astina lies exhausted on her bed, and Arthur is on duty next to her. A man enters the room with incredible anxiety and introduces himself as Viscount Bellois. Arthur introduces himself in response, and the man inquires about her ladyship's well-being. The boy points his hand at the exhausted Duchess and declares that the Viscount himself sees everything. The man, in despair, reflects that, as luck would have it, the Duchess was attacked by robbers and severely wounded. The Viscount realizes that the attackers were bandits working for him and wonders if the lady is very angry. Arthur calmly notes that his cousin is very caring, and it is his anger that is worth fearing. The man almost loses consciousness. Not only was the Duke's wife attacked, but his closest relative was also with her. After waiting for the Viscount to leave the room, Arthur tells Astina that she can get up. The Duchess jumps up and keenly wonders where Jessie is, to which the boy replies that she is resting in the other room. Watching Astina unwind the bandage, the boy wonders whether it was necessary to do this. The Duchess explains that in order to resolve Jessie's issues, she herself had to become a victim of those robbers and the Viscount. Arthur indignantly says that Jessie was very frightened when she saw her mistress's injury. She clearly did not want this method of solution. The Duchess says in surprise that she was sure that Arthur did not like the girl. The boy shouts that anyone would not be happy to receive such a junior student because the Knights of Adelant are no joke. The young man continues that wherever Jessie goes, the road in front of her will turn into a field of thorns. Arthur is confused when he hears that, according to Astina, Jessie herself knows this very well. The Duchess asks if Arthur really thinks that she supported the girl's talent without knowing about all this. The girl asks her relative to leave Jessie alone because she herself chose this life. With annoyance, Arthur declares that he will not interfere in anything anymore, even if Astina is deeply wounded in front of him. The girl is happy that the boy is finally becoming more mature, to which Arthur remarks that she herself needs to grow up. As he leaves, the boy invites Astina to think about how she will justify herself to her husband. He is unlikely to turn a blind eye. Sometime later, the Duchess hears her husband's voice, hastily throws away the book and goes to bed. The door swings open with a loud knock, and an alarmed Theodore runs into the room. Seeing that his wife is lying with her eyes closed, the Duke rushes to her and asks where it hurts. The wife, with tears in her eyes, rushes to her husband and loudly declares that she was very, very scared. Suddenly, Theodore notices the discarded book and realizes that his wife is putting on a performance. Turning to the Viscount, the young man declares that he wants to be left alone with his wife. With a threat in his voice, the Duke says that if the Viscount does not find the remaining criminals, he will be personally responsible for everything. Trembling with fear, the man assures that he will make every effort in this investigation. The couple are left alone, and the Duchess joyfully declares that her husband is just great. Looking at the wound, Theodore states that he let his wife go alone because he trusted her. The girl nonchalantly replies that there will be no scar, but the Duke notes that this is not the problem. The young man does not understand why he had to take such risks, why his wife does not value herself so much. Astina calmly replies that her wound is not serious at all, and there is no need to worry so much. Theodore angrily states that ordinary people consider any knife wound serious. Pointing a finger at her husband, Astina declares that the real wound is deep in his heart. The young man leans shyly towards his wife, feeling that his heart is ready to jump out of his chest. Suddenly, the girl hears loud steps outside the door and notices that someone is coming. A servant comes in and reports that the Viscount is ready to completely transfer to the Duke the rights to pass judgment on the robbers. Lying under the blanket, the Duchess understands that everything is happening strictly according to her plan. Leaning towards his wife, the Duke says that he is going to look at the bandits who attacked her. Left alone, her ladyship gets up and decides to go check on Jessie. Suddenly, the door to the room swings open, and Arthur shouts from the threshold that Jessie has been kidnapped. Astina jumps up and asks in surprise if the robbers have really entered the estate. The boy says that the girl decided to go home and visit her family, but he decided not to let her go alone. 3 hours ago, young people came to the girl's house, where she told her family about how the situation had developed. Jessie declares that she will now leave her parents' home and become a devoted servant to her mistress. The mother looks at her daughter thoughtfully and asks if she really isn't dating the guy sitting next to her. Jessie starts waving his hands furiously and declares that nothing like that is happening. The mother remarks that she finds it strange to hear that her daughter will learn to wield a sword, and the father says that it could be dangerous. Arthur reflects that he expected the family to dissuade Jessie, but did not expect it to be so obvious. The parents persuade their daughter to return home, help them, and then get married. The girl clenches her fists and declares that the Duchess believed in her, which means she will become her knight at all costs. Suddenly, there is a knock from below, and the parents ask the girl to go and see who came there. When Jessie leaves, his brother laughs and says that he didn't expect to hear such nonsense from his sister. The father notices that although the Duchess believed in Jessie, she herself is a woman and cannot understand weapons. Arthur remarks that the man cannot even imagine how incredible her ladyship is with a sword. Having learned that the Duchess herself invited Jessie to study, the man incredulously asks whether his daughter really has talent. Noticing that the girl does not return for a long time, Arthur decides to go and check. Going down, the boy mutters under his breath that he doesn't know about the mercenary, but Jessie definitely won't become a knight. Arthur opens the front door asking why the girl was so late, but is surprised to realize that there is no one in the yard. The rain begins to drum on the ground, and the boy notices many footprints. The head of the robbers asks if the Viscount really said that there was no chance of freeing their accomplices. One of the robbers remarks that their comrades have definitely come to an end, because the Duchess herself will judge them. The leader angrily bangs his fist on the table. He never expected that the Duchess would be in the carriage. Looking at Jessie, the man says that they need to leave as soon as possible, but first they will take revenge on her. The bandit goes to the door after hearing a knock, wondering who could come here at such a time. Astina, wet from the rain, stands on the threshold and calmly says that she would like to return her maid. The leader notices that they cannot torment such a noble person, so he invites the Duchess to get out quickly. Astina coldly replies that a master should never abandon his subordinates. The man orders his henchmen to seize the Duchess, and later they will decide what to do with her. Pulling out the sword, the girl declares that in this case, she will answer in her own way. Astina calls on everyone to get their weapons, because if not them, then she will be the one who will kill them all. The leader understands that they are on their tail, and in this case, they may not spare the Duchess. The man orders the bandits to get rid of the girl right now, and they immediately rush to attack. The leader watches in bewilderment as the bandits fall dead one after another. In a rage, the leader shouts for them to attack all together, despite the fact that there is only one girl in front of them. Having dealt with all the robbers, Astina approaches the trembling man and asks where his self-confidence has gone. Suddenly, someone grabs the Duchess's leg and she turns around, surprised that someone is still alive. Having repelled the leader's blow at the last second, Astina irritably thinks that she has made a completely stupid mistake. Without lowering her sword, the Duchess kicks with force the one who is holding her leg. After a couple of moments, the girl looks at the dead body, noticing that everything turned out to be simple to the point of banality. Suddenly, the Duchess notices that one of the bandits is running away and realizes that he is too far away to catch up with him. The man throws open the door and runs outside, bumping his body into Theriot's sword. The Duke grabs his wife by the shoulders, shouting that she had no right to go to such a place alone. Astina examines her dress, thinking that because of the blood, her husband misunderstood everything, and in fact, the blood is not hers. The young man shouts with rage that Astina could have been killed and does not understand how one can be so irresponsible. The girl notices that she asked Arthur to convey everything to the Duke and asks if he really didn't do this. Theriot admits that as soon as he learned that his wife was in danger, he was very scared. The girl says in confusion that nothing serious happened. The Duke asks in bewilderment if his wife is not at all afraid of dying. The Duchess says that she sometimes thinks that even if she dies, nothing can be done about it. At a time when Astina had a lot to lose, she could not remain so frivolous. But now the girl does not feel any value in her life. The Duchess asks her husband if life and death are really that significant. Theriot asks in confusion how his wife can say such terrible things so simply. Astina understands that everything is not simple for the Duke, and a person who does not know the reason to live will not be able to convince her of the value of being. In despair, the Duchess declares that she wants nothing, and nothing is dear to her. Astina continues that she doesn't want to protect anything, and nothing matters to her. With tears, the girl admits that she lives simply to find a reason. Theriot tenderly strokes his wife and asks her to live for his sake, because without her, he will die. A memory flashes through Astina's head of how Theodore gave her the title and told her that from now on, she must live for him. The Duchess shudders from the thought that Theodore is constantly stirring up her memories from the past and tormenting her with this. Theriot points out that if his wife's life saves just one person, wouldn't she become a little less useless? The girl strokes her husband's cheek and asks if he is afraid of losing himself. The young man admits that he cannot imagine how Astina can be so detached. Looking at her husband, the girl understands that she still has one unresolved question, namely why she still stayed in a talent. Why couldn't the Duchess ignore Theriot's request? Because before she would have calmly done so. Astina initially felt sorry for the monster Duke, but later accepted him as her friend. Approaching her husband, the Duchess understands that this is just a shell created in order to hide her weak essence. Kissing the Duke, Astina reflects that there was really only one reason why she decided to stay with the Duke, all because the girl wanted to see the face of her past lover, Theodore. Theriot jumps away from his wife in great embarrassment and asks what this all means. With a smile, Astina asks her husband not to worry, because tomorrow he will also wake up as a human. Suddenly, the Duke's heart begins to beat loudly, and he does not understand why, because his wife is not holding a sword. Benjamin admits that he is a little nervous because he is not used to open scenes. The Emperor declares that he is glad that the young man has changed his mind, albeit somewhat late. Benjamin accepts that his father is right and says that it was all because he was too weak. The Emperor is confident that Frimo will be very happy to hear that Benjamin will become their strength. Putting the glass on the table, the father says that he will talk to Frimo himself, since the time has come to strengthen their brotherly relationship. The young man remembers the first time he met his brother, and he asked his name. Having learned that the boy does not wield a sword, the older brother remarks with a grin that modesty is also education. Fremo mockingly says that for such a young age, his brother is quite well-mannered. One day, the mother took the boy to the forest and declared that from now on, Benjamin was not part of the Imperial family. This was the only way he could survive. The woman assures that the boy must grit his teeth and survive, even if he has to wallow in the mud. The mother convinces the surprised Benjamin that from now on he must not pronounce the name of this terrible castle. But in the end, it was not Benjamin who met death, but his weak sister who remained in the palace. Walking along the corridor, the young man confidently thinks that all these events were not connected with Fremo, so he should not be afraid. The young man has no desire to get involved in the battle for Imperial power. He wants to gain power to save Astina. Benjamin realizes that he needs to be on his guard against Fremo, his own mother, the Empress, and her children. Lost in his thoughts, the young man does not notice how a girl blocks his way, noticing that such an unkempt man has come to such a great place. Benjamin realizes with annoyance that, as luck would have it, the one he least wanted to see appeared in front of him. In front of the young man is Fremo's sister Isis, who was responsible for developing a plan to eliminate all the heirs of the emperor. The princess remarks that the pathetic brother would have been better off continuing to live like a dead mouse. Benjamin immediately decides to let his sister know that he did not return to claim the throne. The girl notices that in this case, the young man decided to become a coward, to which he replies that he will not become a scoundrel. Continuing on her way, the princess does not know whether the young man will be able to survive, because he must know how cruel and difficult Fremo is. Approaching her brother's ear, the girl says that she will tell him something interesting and asks if the young man had a sister. Benjamin listens in shock as Isis reveals that it was Fremo who killed his sister. The girl says that Eelwes died 7 years ago, and at the same time hunting competitions were taking place. The girl died from an arrow from an unknown person, and the sudden incident was quietly hushed up. The Imperial Palace decided to protect something more important than a powerless girl. Benjamin desperately thinks that he needs to pull himself together. Now is not the time to be angry. Isis says that since her brother decided to return to the palace, she can tell a lot about Fremo. The young man does not understand why the princess decided to share her secrets with him. She definitely wants him to fall under her influence. Isis notes that the fact that you can hold something terrible in your hands and the fact that you can tear it into pieces are completely different things. Benjamin does not understand what the princess is leading to, and she suddenly asks him to help her. The girl confidently declares that she will soon become an empress, and she needs a man for this. Isis invites her brother to become her supporter for the sake of her goal and for the sake of his revenge. The young man passionately declares that the princess's plan is not only dangerous, but also impossible. Isis notices that Benjamin's reaction is too banal and invites him to remember Empress Martina. The girl states that in fact, not only men have ambitions. Benjamin says that her sister is no better than Fremo and asks her to think about how much blood is stained on her hands. The girl calmly replies that she has no intention of sugarcoating her actions and has, in fact, killed many half-siblings. Isis says all that matters at this point is that she didn't kill Benjamin's sister. Looking at the princess, the young man thoughtfully asks if she can kill Fremo. The girl places her hand on her brother's shoulder and declares that she is looking forward to the festival in honor of the season before the harvest. Finally, Isis says that, among others, the Duke and Duchess of Ataleta have been invited to the celebration. Reading the invitations carefully, Astina declares that the right time has finally come. Theodore does not share his wife's enthusiasm and says that all this is dangerous. The Duke notes that he can only show his human form for half a day. If anyone reveals his situation, he will be remembered for the rest of his life as Theod's monster. Astina notes that no one knows anything yet, and the Duke himself secures this nickname. With a smile, the wife says that the appearance will be more impressive on the big stage with attentive spectators. This is the rule of the ball. Theod laughs and remarks that the Emperor is definitely narrow-minded, and the Duke cannot refuse this offer. Astina states that she has a plan and invites her husband to look at the map. The girl says that you need to move secretly because, as the Duke said, no one should see him as a beast. The Duchess notes that the ball will begin in the evening, and it will not be strange if the main character appears a little later. The maids, servants, and butler will be the first to go to the capital's castle and put it in order. The spouses themselves will move forward a little later and will choose a path that no aristocrat will definitely take. Astina is sure that a minimum number of people are needed to accompany her and offers to take Hyson, Jesse, and Arthur. Theriot quietly asks what his wife will do if he has to be tied hand and foot. Astina calmly declares that she will be with her husband precisely so that this does not happen. Suddenly, the girl takes her husband's hand, kisses him tenderly, and says that this is all a great honor for her. The young man is so stunned that he changes the subject and declares that he will listen to the advice because it was given by his faithful knight. Astina understands that her husband is making fun of her, but she speaks absolutely seriously, remembering what the Duke told her in Bellois. Confounding her husband, the girl laughs and declares that she has not heard such selfish words for a long time. Theriot pays attention to his wife's words and notices that, obviously, there was still such an unscrupulous person. Astina assures her husband that he is not at all unscrupulous, and she realizes that he did not say this out of selfishness. To Theriot's surprise, the wife claims that her husband was simply trying to console her. The Duke is amazed by his wife's insight and realizes that if he says this again, she will push him away again. Looking at the smiling girl, the young man reasons that if she knew how much she didn't want her to leave him, she wouldn't smile so kindly. Taking his wife's hand, Theriot speaks anyway, that he wants her to live for his sake, and then his own useless life will acquire great meaning for her. The young man says that his wife gave him real life, so now he will always live for her. Arthur stands in front of the door, hears the conversation of the spouses, and cannot decide at what moment he can enter. Suddenly, having greatly frightened the boy, Jesse leans over to him and asks why he doesn't come in. Arthur angrily asks why the girl came here, to which she calmly replies that she brought the Duchess a letter of repentance. In Bellois, Astina was very dissatisfied with the youth and stated that although everything ended well, the punishment could not be postponed. The Duchess decided that each of the couple should write 10 pages about what he repents of. Jesse, seeing Arthur's embarrassment, notes that if he has not yet finished writing the letter, then she can give hers later. The girl admits that the boy was punished because of her, because she should have stayed in the estate then. Arthur believes that Jesse should be angry with him, but the girl knows that her interlocutor stood up for her in front of her parents. The boy is embarrassed and states that he did this because the girl's family doubted the Duchess's abilities. Jesse understands that Arthur did not do this out of a good attitude towards her, but still she would like to thank him. The young man is surprised to hear that no one has ever helped his interlocutor like this. Leaving, the girl asks Arthur to tell him when he finishes the letter. Then she will give hers. The boy looks thoughtfully after Jesse and reflects that she is not in a position to take care of him now. The next day, Theriot sits in his office and discusses with Oliver what special gift he can give to his wife. With a sigh, the Duke notes that his wife is not an ordinary person, and it is very difficult to find a gift that she will like. With his gift, the young man wants to show his wife the happiness that can be obtained by continuing to live. Oliver notes that if the gentleman does not know what her ladyship likes, then you can think about what she needs. The butler says that the Duchess will soon go to the capital, and she will need a lot of things there. Theriot reflects and remembers that Astina has a half-empty dressing room. The Duke orders Oliver to call the tailors and tell them to sew until the Duchess begins to wave her hands in denial. Astina examines all kinds of boxes, and the dressmaker notices that by order of the Duke, the girl can ask for whatever she wants. The dressmaker reflects that this is all a little too much, even taking into account that her ladyship is leaving soon. Examining the hat, Astina decides that she must definitely thank His Excellency. The dressmaker notes with a smile that first they need to do something for which the wife will thank her husband. A few hours later, Theriot goes to his wife's quarters, thinking the shopping is over. The embarrassed dressmaker explains to the Duke that she was only following his orders. Greeting his wife, Theriot states that he wanted to know about his wife's orders because they are going to the ball together. Astina points to the fabric she chose, and her husband remarks in bewilderment that brighter colors would suit her. The wife replies that the chosen one is quite enough for a gift, and besides, wool will not be visible on these fabrics. The Duke laughs and remarks that one dress will not be enough to satisfy his honor. The dressmaker hands the Duke the bill, and he is amazed to realize that Astina ordered all the most expensive things. The young man thought that his wife would refuse the gift and was already upset in advance, but everything turned out quite the opposite. The girl explains that she decided not to save money in order to look decent at the Imperial ball. The tailors leave, and Theodore remarks that if he had known that his wife loved clothes so much, he would have prepared more than anything else. Astina answers with a laugh that the spouse should be more frugal with family property. Theodore takes up the humorous tone and says that if he goes bankrupt, his wife will have to feed him. The Duchess notes with a grin that this is a pretty good option. Looking at his wife, the Duke admits that every now and then he misunderstands her. The young man notices that when he hears such kind words, he forgets about his place, because his wife is worried about a monster who is not in her heart. Astina understands her husband's affection. It is obvious that a person who does not want to become a monster will hold on to the key that saves him. Clenching her fist, Astina understands that the need to get rid of the curse protects her from love, which in the past was like a curse for her. Theodore continues that although the Duchess is kind to him, the beast has no conscience. The girl notices that the young man is obviously worried, but she will calm him down. Theodore sits down on his knees in front of his wife and asks with interest how she was going to calm him down. The husband looks at his beautiful wife and reasons that to win her heart, he is ready to use all possible methods. Suddenly, the girl approaches the Duke and kisses him tenderly. The young man puts his hand on Astina's back and states that she must calm him down properly. The Duchess does not have time to answer anything before her husband hugs her tightly and kisses her himself. The Duke is so incensed that he can hardly restrain himself and knocks his wife over onto the sofa. Pulling away, Astina stares at her husband and asks if they should try to level up. Standing in the bathroom, the young man looks at himself in the mirror and does not understand what all this could mean. The wife offered to go to the bedroom early and said that she would use the bathroom outside and the husband should wash himself and come. Theodore doesn't understand whether he should go out to his wife in a robe or go just like that, with a towel on his hips. Sometime later, dressed in trousers and a light shirt, the Duke enters the bedroom. Astina looks at her husband and invites him not to stand in the doorway, but to sit next to her. Sitting on the bed, Theodore thinks that he should have closed the curtains and cannot decide whether to do it now. Turning to the young man, Astina asks if maybe they should start already. For some reason, the Duke gets the idea that his wife is talking to him about divorce. Astina, thinking about her own thoughts, says that she should have thought of this earlier. The girl states that if kissing has a result, then perhaps other contacts will have an effect. The Duke is surprised to understand that his wife was talking about a way to get rid of the curse. But what contacts does she have? Astina explains that they need to try something like kissing. Turning to her husband, the Duchess invites him to hold hands. The young man notices that they have held hands before, so this is unlikely to have any effect. Astina thought that Theodore the wolf began to obey her better, not thanks to training, but precisely because of physical contact. The Duke remarks that if they want to make progress, they must do something more serious than a kiss. The wife replies that the young man is absolutely right, and spreading her arms, offers him a hug. Seeing how the expression on her husband's face has changed, Astina can hardly restrain her laughter. Realizing that it is better not to argue, the Duke accepts the offer and gently squeezes his wife in his arms. Pressed against her husband's chest, Astina says she can hear his heartbeat. Theodore abruptly throws his wife onto the bed and, hovering over her, says that she is making fun of him again. Looking at her husband, Astina realizes that she obviously went a little overboard and declares that he should not be shy. The Duke begins to kiss the girl's foot and asks if she doesn't wonder what real embarrassment is. Throwing his wife's leg over his shoulder, the Duke asks why she doesn't answer him. The girl replies that if her husband wanted to give her a warning, then he succeeded, and she will be more careful in the future. The Duke, perplexed, says that Astina herself dragged him into bed, but his wife replies that she did not mean that at all. The young man admits that he no longer understands anything at all, and it occurs to the girl that she is worried about her husband's touch. The Duchess notes that her husband himself did not want to do anything serious, but Theodore says that he may well have changed his mind. The Duke continues to hover over his wife, and Astina declares that this should be done with a loved one. The young man, realizing that Astina does not know about his feelings, asks who his wife is talking about, herself or him. After releasing his wife, the Duke gives in and admits that he cannot defeat her with words. Lying down next to him, the young man suggests not to hug anymore because what they did before can already be considered deeper than a kiss. Astina asks if her husband really thinks that hugs will have no effect. Theodore asks what will happen if one day the kiss does not have the desired effect. Astina calmly replies that then they will experiment, increasing the level. The Duke looks at his wife suspiciously and asks if this means that his wife will do more to him than kiss him. The girl nods affirmatively, and the young man wonders what will happen if, through negligence, they have a child. The Duchess notices that her husband is not the kind of person who would throw his child out into the street because he does not have a mother. The Duke grabs his wife's hands and asks in bewilderment if she will really leave them with the child and leave. Astina notes that the husband needs an heir, and being the child of a duke, the child will be able to take a better place than the child of a single mother. Clenching his fist, the Duke asks why his wife is still going to choose a shameful divorce. Astina knows that staying would be the best option, and she doesn't understand why she is so eager to leave this place. Theodore assures his wife that during the divorce, he will give her everything she needs, but still, he wants the girl to stay with him. The Duchess understands that it's all about the young man's alluring eyes of her memories of the past, which she will never be able to forget. Looking at her husband, the girl understands that due to the strangeness of fate, she can in no way solve everything rationally. Noticing that his wife's mood has deteriorated, the young man hugs her close and promises that he will no longer ask awkward questions. The Duke says that in such a situation, the wife does not have many options to make the right choice. Lying on top of her wife, Astina notices that the young man is making a coward out of her. Continuing to stroke the girl's head, the Duke hears her asking him not to do this. Theodore understands that the girl's words about a deep wound in her heart were based on her experience, and that is why she does not want to reveal her soul to him. Hyzen asks why Arthur suddenly changed his mind about the trip, to which the boy replies that he simply changed his mind. The knight tells Astina that if she starts paying more attention to Arthur, then he himself will have to suffer much less. The Duchess replies that all her affection is directed towards the knight, because he is her special first student. The knight looks at his mistress in confusion and admits that he had no idea how much she believed in him. Astina says that she will travel in a cage with her husband after his conversion. At other times, they will travel in an ordinary carriage and can take Arthur with them. Jessie is happy to hear this information. Recently, she was very worried that the young master was looking at her with anger. Pulling in the suitcase, Jessie notices that there is enough space in the cage, and he and Sir Hyzen will fit perfectly in it. Arthur is perplexed at the idea of a young man and girl being alone inside the same carriage for several days and nights. The boy decides that he must rebel, because the younger student cannot become the master's lover. Approaching the cage, the boy thinks that he must do his best to prevent such a development of events. Squeezing himself between the knight and the girl, Arthur declares that he cannot remain in luxury while his master is suffering so much. Jessie looks at the boy with suspicion, deciding that he has come up with a new type of bullying. Hyzen gets up and decides that he will sit separately because there is clearly not enough space for 3 people on the bench. Jessie asks why Arthur sat so close to her and states that she doesn't like it. The boy shouts that the girl even thanked him recently. But do they really thank those they hate? Raising his hand, Jessie declares that the young master has little understanding of human relationships. The girl admits that she no longer hates Arthur, but she still doesn't like him. Jessie notes that they will both be more comfortable if they don't interfere in each other's affairs. Turning away sharply, Arthur replies that this is exactly what he wanted. Hyzen, watching the youth, thinks that this whole scene is more uncomfortable than the bench on which he is sitting. A few days later, the company stopped for another stop. Astina approaches Hyzen and notices that Arthur has been gone for a long time, and she goes after him. The knight intends to go with the mistress, but the girl assures that she can handle it herself. Approaching the boy, the Duchess calls out to him, which greatly frightens the young man. The girl notices that her companion's clothes are covered in dirt, and Arthur explains that he simply fell along the road. Astina suggests returning to the camp. and the boy asks in surprise if the girl really came for him because she was worried. Arthur is perplexed because he constantly does things that should be hated for, but everyone treats him well. The couple heads towards the camp, but suddenly Astina, hearing something, abruptly stops the boy. The Duchess notices that the sound of beating blades is coming from the direction of the rest. A moment later, the girl takes off running with all her might. Arthur follows her. At the camp, Hyzen and Jesse repel the attack of the bandits who attacked them. The knight understands that these are not hired killers, but simple mountain robbers who have chosen the wrong opponents. The man hears the sound of an axe and realizes with alarm that the bandits managed to get to the cage. Astina, running out of the forest, shouts for the thieves to immediately take their hands off the carriage. The girl states that if the bandits do not want to die, then they should heed her warning. Deciding that they first need to catch all the travelers, the robbers rush at the Duchess. One of the bandits decides that if they can catch the girl alive, they can sell her for a higher price. Without having time to think through his thoughts, the bandit receives a powerful blow to the face with the hilt of a sword. The robber suddenly realizes that everyone, from the coachman to the girl, is not at all ordinary people. The man admits that the enemy knows how to surprise, but since they came here, they cannot leave empty-handed. The bandit gathers his comrades and orders everyone to grab the girl together. Arthur realizes that there are too many opponents and calls Hyzen for help. Suddenly, everyone is startled by a loud crash coming from the direction of the cage carriage. Astina runs up to the carriage and shouts in alarm that Theo cannot get out. But after another powerful blow, the doors shatter into pieces, and a huge monster jumps out. Having scared away the robbers, the beast hears the order of its mistress and instantly sits down. Squeezing the axe, the robber realizes that the trained monster can be sold for a very high price. Swinging an axe at Theo, the robber screams loudly, attracting the Duchess's attention. The man doesn't have time to finish when Theo, with one powerful blow of his paw, demolishes several people at once. A few hours later, the wolf happily runs after the carriage in which the robbers are imprisoned. Sitting in the coachman's seat, Hyzen laughs and remarks that they now look like human traffickers. Looking at the sky, Astina notices that there are still a couple of hours before dawn, so they will have time to stop. The girl looks with emotion at Arthur and Jesse, who are serenely sleeping, leaning against each other. The Duchess shakes the boy sharply and asks him to leave because she has business with him. Calling Theo over, Astina notices that for the first time in a long time, he was running around heartily and having fun. The girl kisses the wolf and suddenly hears loud screams coming from next to the carriage. Noticing how a certain young man threatens with a dagger, the Duchess decides that he is one of a group of captured robbers. Hyzen quietly approaches the guy from behind and hits him on the head, knocking him unconscious. Astina notices that the stranger does not look like a forest robber, so he cannot be left and will have to be taken with him. In a village hotel not far from the capital, the young man comes to his senses and notices that he has a severe headache. Suddenly, the guy jumps up sharply, remembering that he was kidnapped by human traffickers. And at that moment, the stranger notices that a man who looks like an angel is sitting by the window. Theodore, hearing the noise, turns to the bed and notices with a smile that the young man has finally woken up. Some time later, sitting at breakfast and hearing about what happened, the young man asks for forgiveness and says that he is truly sorry. The Duchess replies that everything is fine, and in such a situation they could well be misunderstood. The guy wants to sink into the ground for waving a weapon in front of such good people who brought him to the hotel. Astina assures that they could not leave a person in the forest who sincerely wanted to help others. The young man flattered by the girl's words. Once again, he sincerely thanks her for everything. Theodore comes up, puts his hand on his wife's shoulder, and asks if all the misunderstandings have been resolved. The Duke reports that the girl clearly needs simple and satisfying food, so he has already ordered everything. Astina looks at her husband with gratitude and hopes that the local chef has good culinary skills. The guy watching this scene asks in surprise what kind of relationship the young people have. Speaking at the same time, Theodore says that they are friends, and Astina assures that they are spouses. The girl looks at her husband in bewilderment, not understanding why he lied so stupidly. Theodore gets out of it and explains that he and his wife, among other things, are good friends. The young man reflects that if he gets married, he also wants to present his wife this way. The companion asks where the couple are going. The Duke replies that they are going to Betrayal. The young man is somewhat surprised that the stranger asks if his saviors have a place to stay in the city. The guy explains his interest by saying that he really wants to repay the kindness shown to him and help the couple find housing. Since the Duke refuses, the young man clears his throat and asks permission to introduce himself formally. The young man says that his name is Edwin Tristan, and he is the eldest son of the Marquis Tristan and the brother of the head of the house, and Soran Tristan. Edwin admits that he and his sister don't get along very well, but she is still very kind and knows how to repay the saviors. Hearing who is sitting in front of him, Theodore reflects on the strange turn of fate that has taken place. The deep, fatal connection between Atalanta and Tristan is so well known that everyone in the Empire knows about it. The quarrel began due to a squabble between distant ancestors playing gambling. The Tristan family has been manufacturing weapons for a long time and wanted to expand its sales territory to the southern regions. But the Adelant family flatly refused to allow guns to capture fortresses into their territories. Tristan, who was not allowed into the market of the southern regions, accused the enemy of dictatorship. Atalanta ridiculed the enemy, saying that they were barbarians, unable to solve problems without bloodshed. The family's heirs were almost simultaneously identified, so the war was briefly stopped, but this could not be called the end of the feud. The Duke understands that big problems can await them and decides that he cannot get closer to Edwin even more. The young man holds out a letter and says that with it, his companions will be able to come to their estate and receive a reward. Looking at the letter, Theodore wonders who would believe that the Duke of Atalanta would save Tristan's eldest son. Astina asks if Edwin is heading to the capital to participate in the harvest activities. The young man embarrassedly admits that no, and in fact he has long left his family and does not appear in society. The Duke understands that their situations are similar, and that is why the young people did not recognize each other. The eldest son, Tristan, had poor health since childhood, which is why his sister Ensaran took over the reign of the family. The guy coughs periodically, but overall he looks healthier than rumors circulate about him. Astina notices that since Edwin is not going to the capital, their paths diverge. The young man admits that he is going to go to the east, thinking to himself that it will be as far from home as possible. The Duchess notes that the journey may be dangerous and advises Edwin not to get involved in dangerous skirmishes. The young man stands up, thanks the couple again for everything, and declares that he will pay for their food. When leaving, the guy asks to tell his sister, if the interlocutors meet her in the capital, that he is doing well. The Duchess assures that, if necessary, she will convey everything exactly to the Marquise. Theodore looks at the letter and notices that if they hand it over, then Miss Ensaran, on the contrary, will only get angry. Astina takes the message and says that they are unlikely to ever find out about it. Leaving the hotel, Edwin thinks that his interlocutors were not at all surprised to hear the name of such a large family. Judging by the fact that the couple never introduced themselves, they travel hiding their identities. As he leaves, Edwin realizes that he doesn't need to know their identities, just to repay their kindness. Going up to the rooms, Theodore comes to the conclusion that his wife will not be interested in a man with whom political problems are associated. The Duke was very confused when he woke up in the morning and saw a completely unfamiliar man. Watching his wife in the dining room, the young man noticed that she addressed the man very, very politely. Theodore looks at his wife and asks if she is upset that Edwin is leaving, since she is clearly interested in him. The girl calmly replies that she doesn't sympathize with people so easily, that Heeson just misunderstood and attacked the young man. The Duchess declares that for her, Edwin is nothing more and nothing less than a pointlessly too correct person. The Duke asks if his wife's words mean that there was absolutely no other meaning to her actions. Astina assures that her husband is worrying in vain, because the moral principle of a married person is his devotion. Theodore states that it would be much better if the wife refrained from intercourse with other men if possible. Looking at the Duke, Astina notices that he is in vain thinking about this. Continuing on her way, the girl says that when assessing a person, she tries to look at his intentions. Stopping, the Duchess explains that she is talking about how the Duke was angry with her in Bellois. Astina is sure that her husband knew that the situation was not so dangerous, but nevertheless flared up like a flame. The young man looks at his wife, asking if his excitement is depressing her. The husband doesn't understand whether next time he should just wish her a good trip and wave. The Duchess meant that she was just not in a bad mood because she knew about her husband's anxiety. Theodore lowers his head and asks if the girl is doing this on purpose. Without waiting for an answer, the Duke takes his wife by the chin and kisses her tenderly on the lips. Moments later, Astina notices that she used to not care at all about her husband's kisses, but lately things have changed dramatically. Hearing these words, Theodore sharply presses the girl against the wall and begins to kiss her more passionately. The couple tries to catch their breath, and the Duke notices that the wife cannot do this with the wolf. Suddenly, the Duke declares that he really wants to know what she meant when she suggested raising the level. Astina wonders whether her husband was offended because she made fun of him, or is trying to lift the curse in this way. The young man confidently notes that kisses also come at different levels. When asked by his wife about the curse, Theodore admits that he is afraid that he will continue to turn into a monster. The husband asks what he will have to do if his wife is dissatisfied with something and does not want to kiss him. The Duke wonders if the girl knows the many meanings attached to a kiss. The young man says that since he has such a curse, he should be interested in this topic because no one knows which kiss will save him. The Duke says that a kiss on the hand carries the meaning of love and respect, just as knights do to their masters. Continuing to kiss his wife, Theodore says that kissing the palm signifies jealousy or hostility. Embarrassed, Astina abruptly snatches her hand away and asks her husband to stop. The husband notes with a grin that there is still a little time left and the girl will probably be curious. The Duke notes that it's not just the curse. His wife needs to know how much she can allow another man. The Duchess sighs loudly, realizes that it is useless to argue, and asks her husband to speak briefly. Theodore kisses his wife on the forehead and notes that this gesture expresses faith and trust. Moving on, the husband says that kissing on the eyelids has a courtship meaning. Suddenly, a trembling Hyzen appears on the stairs and says that there is a strong wind outside. Realizing that he was in an absurd situation, the knight covers his face with his hands and assures that he did not see anything. Astina abruptly runs away and slams the door of the room, and Theodore tells Hyzen that they need to talk. At the family's training ground, Tristan Ensarin confidently draws his bow and takes aim. A servant appears on the steps and loudly shouts to the Marquise that they are in big trouble. The girl calmly changes the arrow and wonders what could have happened. The servant reports that the rumors that Duke Theodore has regained consciousness are true because he has arrived in the capital. Ensarin notes that since the Duke has left his place, the issue of customs duties may be resolved in their favor. The man states that not only this could have been done, but the absence of the head of the Atalant family could have been a great success for them. The Marquise tells Chobi that the true moral principles of the Tristan family lie in obtaining confirmation of the destruction of the Atalanta family. As she leaves, the girl says that she will not rely on any curses. Ensarin recalls seeing the Duke in society. In addition to his beautiful appearance, he had impeccable manners. At the same time, the Marchioness was tormented by the fact that she was trying to join the already established noble society as the head of her family. Noble people did not want to accept the girl. They believed that she had a strange way of posing as a man. The Marquise asks for what purpose Theodore appeared in the capital. Chobi immediately answers that the young man arrived at the Imperial ball. The girl thoughtfully heads into the house and says that she, undoubtedly, should also attend this event. The servant reports that the couple, having hidden their titles, arrived at dawn in the capital and wonders what the lady plans to do. Ensarin declares that he does not even know whether he can get answers to his questions if he takes one look at the Duke's face. Arriving at the horse market, the Marquise decides to look at the horses. Chobi is perplexed. This means reconnaissance in force. The girl says that after the ball there will be a hunting competition, and the Tristan family cannot be disgraced in this. The seller greets the Marquise, and the servant understands that she would still have come for the horses, even if the Duke had not come. After looking through many horses, Ensarin finally found what she was looking for. The Marquise and the approaching Duchess simultaneously extend their hands to the horse and say that they want to see it. The Marquise politely says that if the lady wishes, she can be the first to take a test drive. Astina peeks out from under her hood and replies that she will not refuse such an offer. Having tested the horse, the Duchess declares that she wants to buy this animal. The girl thanks the Marquise, because thanks to her, she was able to buy an excellent horse. And Soren is delighted to hear that the interlocutor wants to tame a horse and use it for hunting. Astina is surprised when the girl says that she noticed calluses on her hands and asked what kind of weapon she uses. Having learned that the stranger owns a sword, the Marquise asks what type of sword the interlocutor owns. Astina replies that she uses a knight's sword and is interested in the lady's success in weapons. Ansarine, amazed, asks how the girl knew that she was a woman. The Duchess replies that she has a typical body type and apologizes for revealing her secret. The Marquise notes with delight that she underestimated the swordswoman because such people understand the physique like no one else. And Soren says that he is interested in archery. Astina notes that becoming a good archer is very difficult. The Duchess says that in this case, the interlocutor must have very strong hands and good eyesight. The Marquise proudly says that there is no other more exquisite weapon than the bow, and not a single competition can do without it. The girl continues that Empress Martina advised people who despise this weapon to plunge into a sea of arrows. At the same time as Ensarin, Astina continues that if these people can open their mouths to him, then it will be good. The Marquise asks where the interlocutor is from and what she does, because this is the first time she has met a person so similar to her. Suddenly, the girls hear loud screams and see that the horse chosen by Astina has reared up. The horse snatches the bridle from the hands of the workers and rushes towards the girls with great speed. And Soren understands that he needs to save the fragile interlocutor, but suddenly notices that the girl is running away somewhere. Moving a little to the side, Astina deftly jumps onto her horse and takes it to the side, while the hood falls off her head. The Marquise looks with admiration at the scarlet hair and realizes that the stranger is strikingly similar to Martina. Astina gives the horse to the workers, hands the seller an envelope, and says that it contains money for the purchase. Chobi notices that it's time for them to start choosing horses, but the girl is already walking away. Ensorn blocks Astina's path and asks her to give her one more minute. The Duchess tastes the tea, and Ensorn reveals that it is a precious drink imported from outside the continent. The Marquise says that this tea cannot be bought even with money, so she only gets it through friends. Astina watches the mistress of the house and understands that fate is truly a nasty thing. The Duchess could not even imagine that the Marquise Tristan was in front of her, so she agreed to drink tea. The girl hopes that since she covered her face, everything must be okay. Noticing the guest's embarrassment, Ensorn asks if perhaps she is uncomfortable being here. Astina admits that she could not imagine such a situation and did not think that her friend would be from the Tristan family. The Marquise admits that if she had introduced herself right away, the girl would have considered it too burdensome and left. Ensorn understands that her request may seem impolite, but still she would like to know the name of her benefactor. After thinking a little, the Duchess introduces herself as Tina, and the Marquise decides to ask her last name. Astina refuses, and the Marchioness notes that if the girl wanted to pretend to be a commoner, she would behave more unnaturally. Ensorn wants to thank his savior and says that the interlocutor can voice whatever he wants. Astina accepts the proposal with a grin and notes that this is all very funny. The girl says that she recently met a man on the road who says something similar. Taking out the letter, the Duchess reports that she met Edwin, who asked to give the letter to his sister. The Marquise, with noticeable tension, takes the outstretched letter and unfolds it. Carefully reading the message, Ensorn wonders where exactly the friend met her brother. The Duchess reports that she met Edwin very close to here, in the lands of Chelban. Having placed the letter on 100, the Marquise asks whether her brother has informed him where he is going. Astina replies that the young man did not tell them the purpose of his journey. Pulling herself together, Ensorn remarks that it is not appropriate for her to worry about a grown man. The Duchess notes that she has conveyed everything that was asked of her, and now it is time for her to leave. The Marquise does not want to let her guest go so quickly, but Astina says that she has an appointment. The mistress of the house declares that in this case, she does not dare detain a busy person. Seeing off the guest, the Marquise offers to visit her again when the girl is in their area. In the carriage, Astina reflects that probably the relationship between brother and sister is not so cold, but for some reason it has cracked. and Soren tells Chobi that she does not know who her guest is and why she is hiding her identity, but she is very interested in her. The Marquise says that the stranger is very similar to the reincarnation of Empress Martina. Arriving at the capital's Atalanta estate, the girl enters the house, thinking that she was too late. Opening the door to the living room, the Duchess is surprised and happy to notice Canna sitting there. With a loud cry of joy, the sister throws herself on Astina's neck. Canna bombards her sister with questions about whether she is safe, whether she slept and ate well. Canna's eyes fill with tears, and she says that she really missed and worried about her sister. Astina hugs her sister and notices that she recently wrote and reported that she was fine. Canna begins to ask her sister for forgiveness for leaving her alone to deal with all the problems. Astina says that she remembers the day when her sister said that there is no person who can live by throwing away his honor. Canna admits that her words were stupid because her beliefs were protected by her sister's sacrifice. The girl sadly notes that honor does not matter if they could not defend it on their own. Astina says that she considers life more important than reputation, to which her sister asks why, in that case, she went to the Duke instead of her. The Duchess assures that she did not want to protect her sister's honor, but herself. Who knows what it is? The girl kisses Canna tenderly and says that she also missed her a lot. Suddenly there is a knock on the door, and Theriot asks permission to enter. Canna asks her sister to let her husband in. Entering the room, the Duke shudders and remarks that he had better come back later. Looking at the Duke, Canna reveals that she has something to tell him. Theriot politely replies that the girl can tell him whatever she wants. Sobbing, Canna asks if the Duke will cherish his wife. Astina sheepishly says that His Excellency does not have to answer this question. Theriot approaches Canna, sits down in front of her, and replies that his wife has already become a dear person to him. While crying, Canna notices that her sister gets attached very easily and therefore treats other people well. Continuing to listen to her relative, Theriot assures her that he will never leave Astina alone. Bursting into tears, Canna declares that if the Duke makes her little sister sad, she will never let him get away with it. Theriot swears that he will treat his wife so well that she will have no reason to cry. Listening to her husband, Astina notices that he is somewhat overacting, even though he is doing it all for show. The Duke rises to his feet and declares that he has prepared something especially for the sisters. Canna happily runs into the capital square, dragging her sister with her. After walking around, the girls settle down in a pastry shop, and Canna notices that her sister's husband is very caring. Astina says that Theriot treats her so well because the girl helps lift his curse. Canna notes that it was enough for the young man to show his gratitude financially. Astina thinks that it all seems like fate. A man born with Theodore's face marries a woman who bears Martina's memories. As she picks at the Taurus, the Duchess wonders what if Theriot really does hold her in his heart. The girl doesn't understand what God wants to say, pushing them into this situation. Canna doesn't understand that she doesn't like her sister, because everyone dreams of such love. The sister says that love, like fate, which you cannot go against, is so romantic. Astina notes that people are happiest when they live an ordinary life, and now it's time for the sisters to return. Leaving the pastry shop, Canna thinks with a grin that such words are spoken by the one who lives the most unusual life. At the ball, everyone is just discussing whether the Duke of Atalanta will come, or whether the rumors about the lifting of the curse are false. The nobility discusses that according to conversations, the Duke arrived in the capital a few days ago, but no one saw him. Suddenly, the manager announces that the family of dukes, Theriot and Astina Atalanta, is entering the hall. Astina smiles defiantly, thinking that she hasn't been shown such attention for a long time, and it's very tiring. Noticing that his wife has changed somewhat in her face, Theriot asks if she is all right. The girl says that she dressed up so much today that she does not consider such close attention as pressure. Astina constantly thinks about her husband's behavior and increasingly wonders whether his feelings are real. Suddenly, everyone freezes at the message that His Majesty Emperor Ezelind, Prince Fremo, and Princess Isis are entering the hall. Sitting on the throne, the Emperor notes that due to poor health, he has not appeared in public for a long time, and now he has important news. The nobles immediately begin to speculate that the ruler will announce that Prince Fremo will become his successor. Ezelind states that he recently found his son, who left the palace when he was very young. Everyone is surprised to hear that due to his health, his son will not be able to take the throne. But this does not change the fact that he is a member of the Imperial family. The Emperor points to the side and invites Benjamin to go out and introduce himself to everyone. A young man well known to Astina enters the hall and introduces himself to everyone as Benjamin Fidelio. Theodore says in surprise that the name seems familiar to him, and the Duchess, shocked, says that she does too. The Emperor announces the beginning of the ball and orders cheerful dance music to begin playing. Deciding to change the subject, the Duchess notices that it is time to dance. Theodore bows before his wife and asks if she would dance with him. As he dances, the Duke says that he didn't think at all that they should have rehearsed this in advance. After a while, the husband notices that whatever the girl does, she does it perfectly. Astina calmly replies that she does this not because she was born with it, but because she trained a lot. Immediately after receiving the title, Martina was tormented by the culture of the aristocrats. Her feet ached in her shoes, and her long skirt was unbearably uncomfortable. But the girl had to endure everything because there was someone who could not be refused. Theodore loved dancing, and at every ball he invited Martine to dance with him. Although this happened before the girl fell in love with him, she tried very hard to protect the king's legs. The dancing couple almost collides with another couple. Theodore manages to push his wife aside at the last moment. Astina notices that her husband dances well, and the Duke replies that the whole point is that the Adelant family has a very unhealthy training of successors. The girl assumes that her husband was lonely as a child. The young man admits that this is really so. Suddenly, Astina wonders if Theodore hates his parents for growing up like that. The young man does not know what would be better, to hate his parents or not to feel anything after their death. The Duke admits that it would be nice to get a warm hug from them for once. Astina, being Martina, often thought about whether it was better to suffer because of love or to suffer from loneliness. A few hours later, Astina is relaxing on the terrace, waiting for Theodore with drinks. The door opens, and not the Duke, but Benjamin himself comes out onto the balcony. The girl notices that she and her friend have not seen each other for a long time, and asks if they should call him by his title. The young man assures that he did not want to hide anything from Astina, and the girl admits that she was very surprised. Benjamin explains that his mother was worried about the succession battle and arranged for her son to live outside the castle. The Duchess thoughtfully asks why, in this case, the young man decided to return. The guy clenches his fists and says that he returned because of Astina's wedding with the Duke. The young man angrily says that Benjamin Leandros has no powers, so he decided to take advantage of the influence of the Fidelio family. The girl doesn't understand what the guy is talking about because they are just friends. Benjamin declares that everything is not at all like that and admits that he really likes Astina. At this time, Theodore carefully examines himself in the mirror, fearing that his hairstyle has fallen apart. Benjamin is a direct descendant of Alito, Martina's faithful assistant. How can he confess his love to Astina? When the girl was Martina, Alito became practically her brother. Astina is once again surprised by how strangely and mysteriously her fate collides with the past. The Duchess firmly declares that this will not work because it is simply crazy. The young man admits that he assumed such a reaction, which is why he hid his feelings for a long time. Astina states that she cannot return the boy's feelings anyway because she is married. Benjamin, remembering the conversations about divorce, declares that if the Duke holds her by force, he will help the girl leave his house. The Duchess states that this is not the case at all, and her decision has nothing to do with her husband. The young man is sad to hear that Astina never saw Benjamin as more than just a friend. Frowning, the guy says that he understands Astina's lack of feelings. For the sake of the girl, Benjamin returned to the castle and would be ready to die for her if necessary. The Duchess declares that she cannot take responsibility for the young man's feelings, because it was not she who forced him to make such a choice. Offended, Benjamin says that he only wanted to become a refuge for Astina, but if she hates it, then he will not do anything. The young man says that he will help the Duchess with what she wants. This will be the love he gives her. The girl replies that the young man will be able to find a more worthy mate, and it is for her that he should save such promises. Benjamin finally wilted and sadly asked if Astina really couldn't give him at least one chance. The guy is sure that it will be enough for him that the girl will divorce the Duke and perhaps someday turn her attention to him. Suddenly, Theodore angrily says that he did not expect the prince to seduce married women. Benjamin boldly replies that the swindler who bought the bride for money has no right to reproach him. The Duke vehemently remarks that those who know what shame is should also know when to step aside. The young man replies that he is confident in his feelings and will not run away from his opponent with his tail between his legs. Barely restraining himself, Theodore asks to know the limits of shamelessness and, being the prince of the empire, not to so openly desire someone else's wife. Benjamin is sure that this marriage will not last long. It is not in Astina's character to change decisions made earlier. The prince advises the Duke to continue living, grasping at the meager chance, but all this will not last long. The Duke puts his glass on the railing and notices that his wife did not give the young man even this meager chance. The young people continue to be insolent to each other. The situation around is noticeably heating up. Suddenly, Astina begins to scream loudly, calling on the men to stop the quarrel. The girl reproaches Benjamin for his bad manners and notes that the Duke has the right not to answer him. As he leaves, the prince tells the Duchess that she should stay away from Fremo and Isis. Left alone, the wife asks the Duke how long he has been eavesdropping, but Theodore replies that it does not matter. The Duchess states that her husband has nothing to worry about. She is not going to give up the marriage during the contract. The Duke angrily asks if this means that as soon as the girl is left alone, she will accept the prince's proposal. Theodore notes that he is too careless, because his wife was thinking about divorce from the very beginning. Astina assures that this has nothing to do with Benjamin, and the husband replies that it is cruel to hear a wife defend another man. The Duke approaches his wife's face and notices that she keeps forgetting his words that the monster knows no shame. Astina sharply pushes her husband away from her and urgently asks him to stop. Theodore is struck by a hunch and asks if the prince is the man whom the girl left in the capital when she went to the duchy. Pressing her hands to her husband, Astina notices how hard his heart is beating. The Duchess is horrified to hear her husband say that she looked very passionate when she mistook him for that man. The husband tenderly kisses Astina's hand, but he doesn't understand how she could not notice such an obvious thing. Theodore declares that he will not allow his wife to return to the prince, and the girl clearly understands that this man loves her.